Hello, good morning, Prof. Ahmad.
Oh, yes, good morning.
We'll be starting in a while, about 9 a.m.
Okay, no problem.
Currently, they are taking attendance. So see you in a while. Thank
Sure.
you.
Do you want me to just exit the video? Yeah.
Distinguished professors, fellow lecturers and researchers, and all attendees, ladies and gentlemen, I greet you with a warm greeting of peace. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Peace be upon you. I am Dr. Luqman, and on behalf of the organizing committee, we wish to extend our warm welcome to this special morning coffee talk session with our distinguished professors in conjunction with this year's 23rd Medicine and Health Research Week. The theme for today's session is the art of publishing in the top 10% journals. We have a very exciting lineup for you today, and without further ado, we'd like to invite our moderator for our first session. Please welcome to the floor Professor Dr. Tan Giok Chin. Our honored moderator is a professor of pathology and a consultant anatomical pathology in our Faculty of Medicine. He received his initial training in the anatomical pathology from our university and subsequent PhD from the Imperial College London. He then completed his pediatric pathology fellowship training at the Nationwide Children's Hospital in Columbus, Ohio. Throughout his career, he has received multiple excellent service awards and has won the Best Article Award from the Medical Journal of Malaysia and the Best Poster Award from the Royal Society of Edinburgh. He is currently a member of the UKM's Medical Ethics Committee and the editor-in-chief of the Malaysian Journal of Pathology. In addition, he's also an active member of the perinatal and the gut research groups. His current research interest is in pediatric and perinatal pathology with several ongoing projects. Now, please join me in welcoming our esteemed professor to the floor, Professor Tan Giok Chin.
Thank you very much, Dr. Luqman, for the kind introductions. So good morning, everyone. So welcome to the morning coffee sessions. This is a part of the Medical Research Week, which is organized by the Faculty of Medicine, UKM. First of all, I think I would like to thank Dr. Helga and Prof. Wan Haslinda and the team for the excellent executions of this Medical Research Week. So for today, morning coffee sessions, there are three prominent speakers. We have one, Professor Ahmad from University of New South Wales, Sydney, Australia. Second speaker is Prof. Outing from National University of Singapore. And finally, the third speaker is Emeritus Professor Datuk Wan Zurina from UKM. So it is an honor for me to introduce our first speaker, who is a gastroenterologist by profession. He's the chair of the Department of Medicine, University of New South Wales, Sydney, Australia. He established the first microbiome research center in Australia. He's the editor-in-chief of the journal Gut, which is published by the BMJ Group with an impressive impact factor of 23. I got it wrong last time, I said 16, but look it up, corrections for 23, and to rank third out of 92 related journals. It's a top 10%, very impressive job indeed. With the vast experience in research and charismatic skills in teaching and mentoring, he's the best person to deliver this morning talk, titled From Zero to Hero, Planning Towards Publications in High Impact Journals. Without further ado, please welcome Professor Ahmad.
Professor Chin, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm really delighted and honored to be invited to give this talk this morning. I am, of course, very honored to be one of the distinguished professors at UKM, and I see this as one of the most enjoyable parts of this assignment is to communicate with the next generation. I'll see if I can share my screen now, and then we can start the lecture. So the choice of that title is quite intriguing, From Zero to Hero. I hope that no one is a zero. Everybody has value. And I think it's, let's just get this back on. It's just maximizing your potential to achieve success. And I think we have a fantastic panel this morning. And hopefully I will set the scene for how you achieve success in terms of your output as a researcher. So I will be concentrating on how to get there. So I live in Sydney and work in Sydney, and I send you greetings from everyone here. Unfortunately, we do have a second wave here, so we're a little bit under pressure, but all my best wishes to all of you in Malaysia, and I hope that we should meet in person very soon. So scientific publishing, just to introduce the topic, now as researchers, we really have and doctors, we really have a duty to publish. And that duty is to yourself because of your career and self-esteem and ambition, as well as your legacy, to your colleagues, staff, students, and collaborators. Obviously, they put their faith in you and quite often help you and give you access to their patients or their samples and so forth. Of course, you have an obligation to your institution, which relies very much on your output as a researcher to obtain funding and prominence within the country. Your funders, and these may be government funders, maybe philanthropic, charities, and so forth. Obviously, again, they put their faith in you, so you should be able to, reward them by having high impact output. And of course, most of all, to your patients, because these are the ones that really put their faith in you and depend on you to make progress. So I think all of these things combine to increase knowledge in science and medicine generally. So there's a saying that goes publish or perish. Now, this is probably not strictly true because it's all about really quality and not quantity. So if you really put your effort and maximize the value of the research, this is far more important than the number of articles that you publish. I think it's a very important concept here. Now, having your work accepted for publication is very inspirational. Now, I often say that my career really started when I was a medical student, and I was very fortunate to have mentorship from a wonderful gastroenterologist, Professor Kenneth McCall in Glasgow, where I was a medical student, and I published my very first paper in Gut, and that really is an incredible, start to your career, and lo and behold, and I didn't know this at the time, of course, this was back in the 80s, I became the editor-in-chief of Gut. So this is really something inspirational. This is the letter that we sent to accepted manuscripts. Thank you for submitting your article to Gut, which I have pleasure in accepting for publication as an original article. Well done, and many congratulations on an excellent paper. When you receive that kind of message, it's always very, very elating and elevating. And now, how do you actually achieve this happy letter? Not just for Gut, but for much higher journals as well. So I will go through my recommendations for how to get there from zero to hero. Now, first of all, what is it that we're actually looking for? And Professor Tin will go through this in greater detail, but generally speaking, the high impact journals are interested either in the first report, so that's the novelty, that's what we call the kind of the cornerstone of that story, that developing story. And that, of course, is incredibly high impact. And of course, the last word. So there may be lots of work, some of it contradictory, and you want that piece of work that is the definitive one, basically that kind of final stone that would complete that perfect architecture. Now, so you want sound research with conclusions, which will stand careful scrutiny and can be repeated. You want to make a significant advance, which will stimulate further discussion and research, something that researchers talk about. And we all have our journal clubs, we all have our research meetings. What is it that we're discussing? Those are the articles that really are very high impact. And of course, as you know, for us who are clinicians, it has to have relevance to clinical practice within the foreseeable future. That will make it much hotter. So how can we achieve this? Well, it's very important to start early. So I'm glad that we have the next generation in the audience, and it's never too late, but it's always better to start early and nurture that scientific curiosity and enthusiasm and grasp the research opportunities that come your way. You can go knocking on the door and looking for them. And if you see them, just grasp them, because this will definitely help you along your journey. Now, very important concept here is mentorship. Mentorship is incredibly important. Try and identify someone who could mentor you and guide you throughout your journey. As I said, I'm very fortunate to have stumbled across a superb mentor very early on. And I've been blessed over the years to have mentors that have really guided me at every stage of my career. And we're very close friends. To this day, I consult with them. Always try to improve yourself by lifelong learning. This is a duty for us as humans. God gave us a very sophisticated brain, and it's very important to nurture this. And education is incredibly important in every aspect of life, not just in research. So lifelong learning is quite key to your development. Now, what are the attributes needed to succeed as an academic or as a researcher or as a doctor? All of these kind of things combine into the same set of characteristics: curiosity, ambition, enthusiasm and passion, resilience and hard work, discipline, belief in yourself, and most importantly, humility. So this is just a picture of one of my children. I have 6 children. I'm very blessed to have 6 children, and this is number 5. He's now 17 years old, but this is him when he was 3 years old. And without any pressure from me, he was always very curious, always quite keen to learn how things develop, and always asking why and why not. And this is a marker of originality. I think I love that, and I love nurturing it in my mentees. So always try to challenge dogma. Don't just accept things, always question them. What is the evidence for this practice? How can we make it better? Can we refine the story, and so forth? So that's the curiosity that defines originality and novelty. Ambition, of course, ambition is absolutely essential, and it's the ambition to do something worthwhile in life and to make other people's lives better. So this is not arrogance. This is ambition to do better, to serve people, and I think this is very, very important. You must have that ambition. Enthusiasm and passion. Without them, you will never achieve anything great. I love this saying from Ralph Waldo Emerson, one of the famous American educationalists. Nothing great was ever achieved without enthusiasm, a very important characteristic. Of course, hard work and resilience. You cannot plow a field by turning it over in your mind. You've got to do the hard work. And there are 6 domains of resilience: vision, composure, reasoning, health, tenacity, and collaboration. All of these combine to give you that kind of resilience, which is very important for success. Make your own luck. Don't wait for things to happen. You just make your own luck. And again, I love this saying from, this is Gary Player, who's a famous golfer from South Africa. He managed to get a hole-in-one once, and somebody from people watching said, "Oh, you're lucky." And he just said, the harder I practice, the luckier I get. And this is absolutely true. You make your own luck. The more you work, the harder you work, things will happen for you. It's not luck, it's really anticipated. And of course, self-discipline. You've got to be organized. You've got to be strict with your timeline, allow a good balance for everything, look after your health, and look after your work, look after your family. Be very, very disciplined and composed in the way you approach things. And finally, just have self-belief. If you don't believe in yourself, no one else will, really. Now, humility is a very important aspect and attribute, and especially as you grow more senior. And again, this is a beautiful Chinese proverb that says, "Be like the bamboo. The higher you grow, the deeper you bow." And this is very important to remember that, as you go along in your career, by having humility, people will help you. People will be wanting to collaborate with you. You will achieve more by having that humble approach to things. And I think it's a very important attribute. So, okay, what kind of opportunities should you seek to make your career more special? Now, remember, all leading up to this incredible research that's going to be published in high impact journals. I stress that concept of education. Education is not just going to the university. It's not just reading your textbooks and so forth. It's lifelong learning. You're learning from every aspect in your life. Don't go to bed without reflecting on what you've learned today. Always think, I've got to learn at least one thing new every single day. And that's very, very important. Finish what you start. Don't just start lots of little projects and just leave them unfinished. Finish what you've done. And of course, publish stuff. If you finish something, publish it. Don't just put it on the shelf and forget about it. It's very important to show evidence of your hard work. For those of you who are, academics or future academics or doctors that will go into leadership positions, attend scientific meetings, clinical meetings, attend conferences, observe and watch how people talk and present their data. Learn from them. I think this is the most educational thing that you can do, just by listening and observing. This is incredibly powerful. Have a chance to present at meetings, whether it's local, national, or international. If it's an opportunity, just grasp it. If you have some data, submit an abstract and maybe have a poster, maybe have an oral presentation. And this is how you kind of build up. And if you are ever in a position to chair a meeting, again, whether it's local, national, or international, again, this is kind of development of you as a high impact researcher and leader. So chairing and asking questions at meetings, this is how you get noticed. This is how people remember you. And maybe, when you do present your work, you think, oh, I remember this chap, he asked she asked a very important question. That shows an inquisitive mind, somebody who's actually different and somebody who's over and above your average person. Reviewing for journals is another activity that is incredibly educational. You learn from it how other people communicate. You learn from it the weaknesses and the strengths of research. It's a very valuable experience. And of course, collaboration. Now, this will allow you to go really, really a long way, because by collaborating, and you get to that position from having done all the things that I've discussed at the beginning. So collaboration is an opportunity to link up with other researchers that may be better than you or stronger than you, that you learn from them, and you improve the quality of your research and your output. So seeking scientific exchanges is a very important attribute and opportunity. And if ever there's a fellowship or a scholarship or whatever, the moment you leave your home team or unit and you go outside, you are better. For even by taking the plane outside of that place, you're already much, much better and much stronger. So what is the strategy of success? I will discuss fundamentals of good research, how to get research funding, which is very important to get your research done, and how to communicate this research. This is the fundamentals of good writing and good communication. So we will start with fundamentals of good research. How to maximize the quality and the impact of your research. Now, first and foremost, again, same concept I mentioned at the beginning, mentorship. A mentor, a good mentor, somebody who's well established, a decent team that publishes, and you'll be able to check how much work is being done, how successful they are, what kind of publications they bring out, what's the success rate of their higher degree students, the completion rates. All of these things are kind of good markers that would define a good mentor, somebody who's humble and has humility. Now, all of these characteristics, it might be difficult to find, but you should certainly be seeking good mentorship. Now, there is absolutely no excuse for being ignorant of the existing literature. You've got to know the literature. Do not reinvent the wheel. It's time consuming. It's absolutely energy sapping. For God's sake, there's absolutely no excuse for not knowing what's the latest advances in that particular research field. You want to formulate an important research question. And I say that because important research questions matter more and matter most, particularly to governments and people who are planning the healthcare budget and the management of illness within a particular state or country. So being engaged in that kind of research field is actually very, very, it makes it much easier to be successful. That's not to say ignore everything else, but it just, if you want to start, that would be a very good kind of opportunity to formulate an important research question in a field that is very active. Now, I cannot emphasize enough the value of sound study design. Without a sound study design, no matter how good a communicator you are, no matter how much money you have, it will always be doomed for failure. So you've got to get the sound, the study design absolutely spot on. And you do that by involving a statistician right at the beginning, not at the end. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. You've got to power your studies adequately. And if this is impossible, you need to collaborate. So there's no point in just doing a little study in your little hospital, in your little town or city, and expecting this to be published in a high impact journal. It's not going to be. No one is interested. But if you combine all of these little cities, if you combine all of these things and have a national or a regional kind of collaborative effort, that's very relevant and very important and will make changes. It will impact on the way that we practice our craft, whether it's medicine or science. So again, that allows you to get enough controls, the reproducibility, the validation, all of these aspects will be fulfilled by having those characteristics, particularly collaboration. Now, formulating an important question, as I said, important to do that, something innovative, something novel, and you will get guidance from your mentors. That's where the mentors are actually quite key. Quite often when I'm dealing with my team, I would say, why don't you look at this? This is something that is exciting, or I've been to this conference and someone mentioned this particular study. How about looking at this novel aspect? You know, that's the kind of thing. So that's where the guidance for mentors would be quite important. So, you know, allow yourself to get help, support, advice, and guidance, and that allows you to formulate that very important research question. Now, it's easier for that importance of that research question if it's actually clinically relevant, okay? So that's actually a disease that is, for example, prevalent in your country. You know, don't start researching something that's incredibly rare in your country. So it takes ages to recruit the number of patients that you need. So choose something that is actually very important for your country, something that is a priority, a healthcare priority in that particular country. And that's where there's a activity in that research area. So something where lots of work is being done, lots of money is available, lots of grant funding. So that makes it a lot easier to actually be successful. And always try and aim for mechanistic studies, ones that define the mechanisms of disease. That's far easier, again, to get success in terms of grant funding and in obviously the quality of the research output. So you want to choose a topic also where there is expertise around you. You don't want to be reinventing the wheel. So if you're going to be doing something with genomics or metabolomics, don't start, you know, spending 2 or 3 years setting it up. You know, get someone who's already established and collaborate with them, or go and work there. And actually that'd be a lot easier than you having to develop a new assay or, you know, develop a new antibody and use it, all that kind of stuff. Just get expertise, help. Okay, that's very important. Again, go back to collaboration. Now, sound study design, many projects and many papers, and I know as an editor, you know, that many of them are wasted opportunities because inappropriate controls were used or inadequate controls. There wasn't enough power, mismatched, you know, in terms of gender, purely observational studies. Now, they're interesting and things always start with observation, but it's always better if you can define mechanisms definitively. That's, you know, that increases the quality of the work. In terms of clinical work, a double-blind, randomized, placebo-controlled, parallel group trial design is the most robust. And again, if you've got that, it will more or less end up in the highest journals because everyone is after these randomized controlled trials that are placebo-controlled. So, you know, all of that is building up towards your paper that's going to go into the New England Journal of Medicine, particularly if it was coming from a region as opposed to from a small hospital or a small town. Now, involving statisticians, this is incredibly important to give you guidance at the time you're designing your study, not at the end. Define your primary endpoint, do a proper power calculation, which needs an estimate of the size of the effect that you can expect and the standard deviation. And if you can't achieve that, you might have to do a pilot study to just get a guidance about how much power is required and how much, you know, you're going to have to recruit. And if that end value for that particular study is impracticably large, you know, you're not going to be able to achieve it by having 2 or 3 hospitals or, you know, then you have to collaborate. Collaborate. Those themes will be coming back and back throughout my talk. Now, calling a statistician at the end of your project is very akin to calling a pathologist to do a post-mortem on your patient. All they can tell you is what your patient died of, okay? You're not going to be able to fix anything. Your study is flawed if you get them at the end. That's why it's important to start at the beginning. Now, obviously, you've come up with a great idea, you've got wonderful expertise, you've involved a statistician, and you've got an incredibly exciting project. But without monetary support, without grant funding, without money to pay for your researchers, to pay for your consumables, to get, you know, access to patients and travel and all that kind of stuff, you need grant funding. So research funding is incredibly important. And this is kind of one of the most difficult aspects of academic life, research life. And all of your leaders will tell you this. You know, we spend most of our time trying to get money to support the research that we have. So it's very important to learn the kind of the tricks early on in your career. And generally speaking, government spending on research funding is declining across the globe. You know, they're actually spending less and less on research. Some countries have realized that this is a disastrous situation and they would have to invest, you know, a chunk of your annual budget into going into research and development. Those are the enlightened countries. Those are the countries that will always be at the forefront and the cutting edge of development and achievement. But generally speaking, there is a dwindling pool of funding. So you've got to be, very adept at diversifying and finding other sources. It helps, of course, to be able to communicate what you're trying to achieve with your research. So writing grants and reviewing them is, although it's very time-consuming, it's actually a great skill. You have to spend time and effort to become really a good communicator, so that you're, trying to apply for funding, you'll be taken more seriously. So the other thing is that the tools and the infrastructure for managing grant submissions and reviews are not optimal. That's fine. You've got to play that game. And to be successful in getting grants, you've got to have track record. So this is the kind of the classic catch-22 situation. You've got to have grants so that they can have confidence in you to give you more money. But what's the strategy? How do you play that game? Well, you must, to be very familiar with the funding landscape. Very important to know what's available in your domain, in your country. What are the funding opportunities? Your institutions should be telling you, sending you these circulars. We get these emails every day to say a research, a funding opportunity from this one, from that one, but also diversify. There's a lot of philanthropic funding. There's a lot of charities that would fund small amounts. And it's very important to get to that kind of catch-22 situation, to break away from it, is to basically start small and grow bigger. Little bits of funding to get the pilot data, to publish so that you can get the next bigger one and show that you can be trusted with that research funding. So that's very, very important. Start small and grow bigger is the right approach. No one is going to give you a $5 million grant without any track record. It's just inexcusable to actually dish out this taxpayers' money to a team that doesn't have a track record. It just makes sense. Strategy, collaboration. Once more, that's the way to do it, because by combining your effort with other, especially from other countries, international collaborations, the share price goes up immediately for that team. And there's more confidence in it. Collectively, they'll have more output, they'll have more track record and evidence, and that's very, very useful. So that's basically, I hope a message that will be adopted straight away. Now, there are, of course, educational things, and there's lots of literature. Again, there's no excuse for not finding these. This is a very nice kind of piece here published in Nature last year, talking about the secrets to writing a winning grant. And these were people that had given their story of how they managed to get funding. It's not, the answer to everything, but it just, again, it's that part of learning to the tricks of the trade, as it were. All right, so we've now covered the research question, how to get that amazing research question and how to go about it, and designing the right study and trying to get funding. And then you've ended up doing an amazing piece of work. And now it's time to actually communicate that work by publication. So that's what we're kind of concentrating on this morning. So it's very important to be a good communicator. And scientific communications and writing is not any different from any other communication. If you're telling a story to your son or daughter, you're telling them a story, it's going to make sense. It's going to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. It's going to have a take-home message. So it's incredibly important that whatever you tell them actually makes sense. Okay, so you're telling a story. No matter how sophisticated it is, it's going to make sense. Okay, that's simple concept, but you'll be amazed at the number of papers that we receive in journals where you just read it just in a very neutral way and you think, what the hell is this? This is just a load of rubbish. I mean, you can't even follow the story. Okay, so it's incredibly important to get that. So you must learn how to write effectively. And again, it's a skill. It's lifelong learning. That you acquire that all the time. And again, this is a very nice quotation from Alan Alda, who's an actor from MASH, if you've ever watched this. But he's the founding member of this Alan Alda Center for Communicating Science, interestingly. And he says communication is not something that you add on to science. It is the essence of science. You've got to be able to communicate your science. You are telling them your story. And those who tell the stories rule the world. Communicators, no matter how rubbish that message is. If you can communicate it well, you capture people's attention, and that's often the case. I'm sure you'll have seen examples in politics of this. Now, scientific writing is a skill. Okay, you have to acquire it. It's not an innate characteristic. You've got to work hard at it. And initially, you'll be horrified at the concept of actually writing something like a full manuscript. But trust me, when you complete this task, it is one of the most elevating and elating experiences. You feel so much better and so much, it gives you so much happiness and fulfillment. So it's worth it. All that hard work of going through, writing down your results and going through your discussion and thinking, what the hell am I communicating? It's actually very, very rewarding. Now, for junior researchers, again, starting out in your careers, invest in scientific writing. Attend scientific writing courses and workshops, and there's plenty of these and lots of them virtual now. There's a lot of online resources. There are books and articles. And the most educational thing is actually to read scientific papers regularly, every single day, and see how, just be neutral and see how they communicated the story. Did it make sense? Did I understand it, even though I'm not a specialist? And see how they've constructed that prose, the scientific prose. I think that's very, very useful and very illuminating. So reading is actually one of the most powerful things. But there are resources. I cite this one, one of the publishers. Publishers usually have on their websites. I have no association with this particular publisher, but this, I've looked at the resources and they're actually quite nice. There's many, many others. You can look at them. This is Elsevier, and again, they've got, writing for journals, all that kind of stuff. It's actually very, very nice, and it's free. It's freely available. Now, when you're writing, again, I said is brevity is very important. So instead of writing a very long jargon that is actually incredibly confusing, brevity is very, very useful skill to acquire. So expressing yourself in as little number of words as possible. And I love this quotation from Cicero, which says brevity is a great charm of eloquence. You're more eloquent if you can express yourself in less words. Just remember that. And as an example, this is again a beautiful example. This is a one-pager. This is published in April 25th, 1953. Some of you will probably, it's very difficult to see what the title is, Molecular Structure of Nucleic Acids. This was Watson and Crick, all right? They were publishing the structure of the DNA, and it's just so beautifully written, just one side, one page. And this is their paragraph that I highlighted there in red. It said, it has not escaped our notice that the specific pairing we have postulated immediately suggests a possible copying mechanism for the genetic material. See how that, beautiful little statement says, essentially, we've cracked the code of life. That's how important this work is. Just the one page, absolutely beautiful. So now you're ready, you've communicated, you've written an amazing kind of article, and you're ready to submit. Now, before you submit, just remember, you only have one chance to make a first good impression. You're not going to have a second chance to impress those editors that are just waiting there to read this nugget of, absolutely beautiful piece of work, okay? If you've messed up because you've got your abstract really, nonsensical, you've got typing errors, it's just awfully confusing, that's it. It just gets relegated immediately. Okay, so you've got to be incredible. So all the easy things like your typos, your grammatical errors, all that kind of stuff, is incredibly important at the beginning. And then whether it makes sense or not. Now, you will not be able to judge that because you're biased. You've invested so much in this story. Give it to somebody who's a non-specialist, but with some intelligence, obviously, and just ask them, does this make sense? Is this actually something that you understood, even though you're not a specialist? That's actually worthwhile. It might take a day or two or sometimes a week extra, but it's worth it because people have to understand your message. Choose a great title. Titles are just like when you go shopping, you're looking at what on the display, and that's what attracts you. And editors care about the title. So, it catches it's got to be factual. It's got to have some keywords, buzzwords that would be attractive. It's got to be truthful. All of these things that is an actual skill in choosing the title that is attractive and truthful. And most importantly, at this stage, the abstract. That's the part that we read as editors. We always read the abstract, okay? We don't always read the full paper. before we formulate a decision about whether we send it out for review or whether we just reject it. This might shock you because you might think we're sitting there, reading all the paper, from beginning to end to find out whether it's worthy or not. No, we only read the abstract, because if your abstract is rubbish, the rest of the paper is rubbish. And this has been shown scientifically. There's a study that has been done about the correlation of just looking at the abstract, reading the whole paper, and the decision is exactly the same. Because if you're being careless in writing your abstract, it's very likely that you've been careless in actually constructing and writing that paper. So it pays to actually invest in your abstract, or at least attract our attention so that we can send it out and give you a chance for the science to be assessed. Ask yourself, does the introduction make your research seem relevant and important? Is there a clear message? And most importantly for us as editors, reading your paper, the so what question, like you've sent me your paper, so what, what have I learned? What have my readers got to take out of this one? Has it actually enlightened us in any way? If you can't answer that question, you're not ready to submit. It's got to be something like a so what, answer, one that you can deliver, what we call an elevator pitch. If you're just riding in an elevator, 30 seconds, you should be able to express everything. If all of this is satisfied, you can submit. You're ready to submit. So you've got to choose a journal, and you've got to choose a journal very carefully. And to avoid a lot of heartache and a kind of wasted effort, you've got to be honest and realistic in your expectations. You should know where to pitch. You should know which hierarchy you should be after. Are you going to send to the New England Journal of Medicine? Are you going to send it to a predatory journal that doesn't have an impact factor? Are you sending it to a specialist journal? All of these things, again, it's a skill. But if you've done a proper literature search, you will know what is active, what information is being published in what journal. So that should give you enough kind of guidance as to where to go. And again, you can ask your mentors as to where you should be targeting. So in summary, this is my last slide: education, training, and lifelong learning. That's one of the basics of humankind, okay? Mentorship, choose an important research question, design a good study, complete the study and write it up carefully, check your manuscript fits the aims of the journal before you submit, choose the right level of journal to submit to, read your guidelines before you submit, and then obviously if you have the chance to respond to the reviewers' comments, great, you're almost there, but you've got to actually respond very, very thoroughly. And at the end, you can celebrate success of publishing in a very high impact journal. And I always end with this particular statement for all of you young people out there: it's your generation that's going to benefit from this. You're the lucky ones. You live in the information age. So do not go where the path may lead. Go instead where there is no path and leave a trail. That's your challenge. That's your duty. And with that, I wish you the best and give you all my greetings here from Sydney, from our team here at the Microbiome Centre at St. George and Southern Clinical School of the University of New South Wales. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prof. Ahmad. Your talk has always been very inspiring. The part that I really liked is the one about your first article in Gut and went on to become the chief editor-in-chief of Gut. That is really something very excellent. One of the things that I think that always come into my mind is the one you said about be really good at storytelling. That's how you write a very good manuscript. We now opened questions from the floor. So I see there is one question already. Questions to Prof. Ahmad. Interesting talk, Prof. Ahmad. He says, what is your thoughts on how to deal with manuscript rejections and harsh comments from the reviewers? Thank you.
That's a very important question. And I because of in the interest of time, I didn't discuss this, but I'm glad that you've asked about it because I can give you my opinion and my honest opinion. There is no room for any harsh and comments from reviewers, particularly if they are just ones that are kind of nasty and unnecessarily so. Now we can all have an adversarial system whereby you have to criticize science, but it's going to be done in a civil way. And as editors, we always stamp out on this. If somebody's been nasty and rubbishing the work unnecessarily. We always actually we call that out, and we have a private word with those reviewers and never use them again. But if there's a legitimate criticism of your work and they make fair points, I think I wouldn't argue with these. I think, remember that reviewers are not paid. Reviewers are just like you and me, and they're researchers, and they have their own very busy life to deal with, and they're doing us all a favor. So if you have reviewers' comments and you go through them, and don't respond to them and don't react immediately. Okay, calm down, sleep on it, and then the next day, just sit down and look through them and see, okay, is this a valid point? Is this something that we can address? Is this something that, they're asking for a new mouse model, in IBD to actually validate our results, or they're asking for repeating the entire study again? Is it something that I can deliver? If it's not, then forget it. I mean, you're not going to be able to do that. But if it is, if, for example, they say, well, you've got only 50 subjects in your study, this is small and it's inadequately powered. If you think you can actually deliver on that, you can say, actually, we've already validated this since we've submitted it, we've recruited another, double the numbers, and you think you can actually come up with something that will materially confirm and strengthen your findings, then it's then you can put that. I mean, you actually do a proper revision of your manuscript. So first of all, don't get disheartened, don't get angry. Just see if the comments are actually reasonable or not, and try as hard as you can to answer all of them. Okay. And if you answer all of them, whether you can do it or not is immaterial. But you can say, like, I can't repeat this study. Obviously that's not within our remit. However, I can do all of these things. And editors love the fact that you've responded to comments. So if this was a major revision and you've actually gone out of your way to try and answer most of the comments and be honest about what you can't achieve, that's you're almost there. You're almost there. But, comments that are kind of derogatory and things, don't worry about it. This is actually a reflection of the very, poor reviewer, and editors know this. I mean, they're not, actually, instead of responding in a similar fashion, take the moral high ground and say, thank you for this comment, and here's my answer, as opposed to taking the bait and actually responding in a bad way. So do your best to revise the work, because any revision makes it better. I mean, that's the whole idea of external peer review. When you revise the work, we all benefit because we've extracted more from you than you would have otherwise given us. Okay. So, but if that journal rejects your work, again, don't worry about it. It's not the end of the world. Okay. That, the main thing is that you've basically received a free of charge assessment of your work. It's actually showing you what you need to do. So take that on the chin, do what you can, and then go to the next journal. Now, that's a skill, and we can talk about that one in a separate kind of question, is, where do you pitch after that one pitch? And maybe we can reserve that for another question, but that would be my advice.
Thank you, Prof. Ahmad. I think there's experienced and inexperienced reviewer too. And some of the inexperienced reviewer may not be writing a very good one, and may sounds a bit harsh also. Second question, Prof. Ahmad. I'm having difficulty to detect good research questions that are relevant. While finishing a study, either those questions have been answered with greater power, or the question is not relevant anymore, or old news. How do you detect future trends?
Again, beautiful question. And the answer is simple: lifelong learning. Trust me on this one. I never get disappointed if an original idea that I had gets answered. Okay, because our motivation is knowledge, is pushing the frontiers. It's actually, and trust me, knowledge has no end. It's not a finite thing. If somebody answers that question, you move on. Okay, so they've answered one aspect of this, but it opens up more opportunities. Now, if you've invested, and then you just got pipped to the post, as it were, so somebody publishes exactly the study that you do, again, you just be philosophical about it. It might not be as novel as it was. Just get it out of the way, publish it. Maybe not to the, that high journal, maybe the one just below it. and then take the story further. It's just you can't change it. I mean, that's the nature of science. It's progressive. Knowledge is progressive. Okay, so you will never run out of ideas. But how do you get new ideas? You know, this is another talk. It's the essence of innovation. You know, what gives you? How do you become innovative? You know, is it something that is innate? Is it something that is serendipitous? You know, quite often actually is by diversifying the opportunities where you might get new ideas. For example, if you're just confined to reading one article, one journal, and you don't go to international conferences or you don't participate. And by the way, I mean, nowadays, I think the only positive thing out of this COVID thing is that we can actually tap into many, many more meetings than we could have done in the past, because it's all virtual. And that means you can actually learn a lot more from just accessing a lot of these things. So essentially, you by maximizing those opportunities, it will spark, particularly have an innovative mind, it will spark that curiosity. And then you will come up with new ideas. And then you go and do your homework, you search, has this been answered before? Is there a way I can make it more exciting? If I collaborate and add this to it, is that going to make it much, much better to answer those questions? So that would be my advice about how to keep your innovative kind of streak going. And if you are more senior, okay, and again, I think this is quite interesting, is that the innovation sometimes comes from the next generation. So, by your mentorship, by taking on those very, very bright, students that come your way, now they're just incredibly inquisitive, okay? They will become the source of the inspiration. I get inspired all the time by our discussions with our students, our PhD students, or our, registrars that are doing a PhD or whatever, because you put them on the right track, and then they take off, and then that just enriches what we all do in that particular team. So that's another way of, getting that kind of innovative streak going.
Seems like we have a few more questions. Who is that? Okay, for Prof. Ahmad. The next question, I think, comes from an editor. So this one, I think, will be something quite interesting to hear. How do you encourage scientists to contribute to peer reviewing? It seems challenging to secure good reviewers nowadays.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a beautiful question. Very important. This is a big challenge. I acknowledge that. And of course, there is another important phenomenon, which is reviewer fatigue. I mean, even if you have a core of really, really amazing reviewers, you don't want to be essentially hammering them with lots of work, because they'll get fatigued and then you will lose them. So the way that we do this is, one, incentivize. So, for example, and this is again relevant to the junior staff, all of you young people in that audience, okay? If you get an opportunity to review and you've really done a great job, editors love you, okay? We will call upon you again. And then the way you incentivize this is that if you've delivered a certain number of outstanding reviews, and we score all the reviews, then we have an annual kind of tally of what, how the reviewers have performed. So in terms of actually the quality and the speed with which they deliver the reviews, these are the people that we invite onto the editorial board. So, that's another marker of esteem. If you want promotions, it's great to show under that section that shows editorial duties, that you're on the editorial board of this journal, that journal. And it's also the pool from where you select your editorial committee. So these are the associate editors. And associate editors are obviously a bit more involved. These are the ones that handle the papers, that actually, they're the specialists. And this is how I started. I mean, I was a junior researcher. I had some kind of expertise, and then I did my best to review in a very conscientious way, in a very timely manner. And then, I did so much service to a number of journals. Gut was one of them. And then I got invited to be on the editorial board. And again, I was, one of the top reviewers. I got invited to be an associate editor. And that's how it started. And then, from then, so that's how incentivizing it. Secondly, is obviously spreading the load. So you can't just keep hammering the same ones. The third is you actually, from your excellent reviewers, you take, so, okay, is there anyone in your team that is actually, has expertise, that is keen to do that. Again, we encourage the postdocs, we encourage those ones that have, like even some PhD students that have an expertise. So that's how you enlarge you enlarge your pool of reviewers. And in that way, you're kind of developing and nurturing and actually supporting that next generation of reviewers that will hopefully be excellent editors as well.
Thank you for that comment. The next questions, I think, is probably related to the first few questions. I say thank you very much for an interesting talk. My experience, it's more difficult to work with reviewer in Q4 journals, quarter 4, compared to the quarter 1. What is your opinion on this? Thank you.
More difficult to work with them.
More difficult to work with the Q4 than the Q1.
Yeah, this is yeah. I mean, it's. I think that's just the personality sometimes. I mean, that's the problem. It might not be a kind of a widespread phenomenon, but usually, the Q1, at least you get a very definitive answer very quickly. So your submission, and that's actually that kind of dovetails quite nicely with the previous question of reducing the reviewer fatigue, is that they give you a very quick answer. So they try and reduce the number of papers that go out for review by giving an instant rejection. And that's based on a number of criteria like, novelty and priority and that kind of stuff. However, the lower you come down, I mean, from Q1 to Q4, there are journals that obviously have no priority. In other words, it's open access that it's a kind of an economic kind of decision, really. The more papers to. But generally speaking, if you've had a bad experience with a particular journal, don't go to them again. I mean, I think this, it just don't waste your time. That's the best way to approach it. And there is there's obviously a hierarchy, but there's also personal connections. I mean, if you do know or through your collaborations, you can get guidance as to where we should send this. This is a big decision. This is, I put it in one of my slides, is actually the choice of where you pitch is not an easy one. It's not a simple one. It has to be a very considered one, precisely to avoid those difficulties with difficult editors and difficult journals. For example, I mean, somebody comes to me, one of our collaborators, to say, look, we've finished the study, we've written it up and that kind of stuff. Where do you think I should send it? Should I send it to that journal? And I think, that journal is okay, but they take ages to give you a decision. It takes them 3 months, 4 months to tell you what the decision is, or it takes them a month to tell you that it's not even out for external peer review. I wouldn't send it to them. Now, it might be a very high impact journal, but it's just useless. I mean, I don't want to be wasting that length of time to have my paper rejected. So with that one, I think you can, guard against those circumstances where you're going to have difficult, horrible editors that basically are not worthy.
We have 2 more questions from the audience. This one is about course and open access journals. So nowadays, all high impact journals are costly when it gets published, in contrast to 10 years ago. Whether this is a conflict of interest in part of the journal themselves. You have money, can you publish in higher impact journals? What is your opinion on this?
Yeah, this is a very important topic at the moment in publishing, open access and the requirement for making research open access. I think there's a very legitimate and honorable, drive from particularly the top funders, the NIH, Wellcome Trust, the Medical Research Council, MRC in the UK, the European equivalents. All of these kind of big funders are now demanding that the work is open access. Okay, in other words, it's available. You don't have to be a subscriber to the Lancet or to the New England Journal of Medicine to gain access to that research. So they insist on having that kind of open access. Now, obviously, the publishing is incredibly lucrative. By the way, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry, very, very lucrative. So you're going to get obviously some fight back from the big publishing houses because they don't want to essentially make everything open access. Who's going to pay for the cost of the publication? So somebody's got to pay. Okay. Now, those big funding agencies say, well, okay, we will pay. If we fund someone, with our grants, there'll always be a budget within that grant to pay for the publication fee in this, these very distinguished, whatever you publish it, but it's got to be published open access. Okay. At the moment, there's a bit of a fight. There's a bit of a, like a tug of war between the publishers and those very powerful funding agencies. And a lot of journals are kind of, having a metamorphosis. They're trying to kind of reinvent themselves by allowing kind of an open access track. In other words, the author pays, and that basically allows you to have open access, and having unlocking some content. For example, in our journal, the editor's choice is always free. I pick one article every month that I want to be free, and quite often I pick one that is actually not open access. In other words, the authors couldn't pay the fee, just to increase the content of open access. But essentially, someone has got to pay for it. Now, the question was, if you have money, are you able to publish more in the higher impact journals? The answer is no. It makes absolutely no difference whatsoever. The higher impact journals is all based on quality. And at the end of the day, they will not be more likely to accept your work if you're able to pay, because that payment transaction is right at the end, just before the work goes on to typesetting, and the production kind of pathway. So money doesn't make any difference at all in terms of the editorial process. We as editors, we're completely independent. I have absolutely no say whatsoever in what the publishers do in terms of setting the tariffs or opening this up to poorer countries, which is one of the things that, for example, the BMJ does. There are certain countries that are exempt from paying any, and GOT, of course, doesn't have any page charges. We don't charge people to submit the work and have it published. But if you want open access, you have to pay for it, and that's the track that they've used. So it's a very complex issue. But the main thing, your main obligation is to do high quality work, and ultimately that's what's going to decide whether it's to be published or not.
Thank you, Prof. Ahmad. We still have 3 minutes. I think I'll take this last question and then a few from myself. Sure. These questions are a very interesting one. Excellent talk, Prof. Ahmad. How to bridge the gap between Western and Asians affiliated institute to publish in high impact journals?
Yeah, well, see that gap, is already bridged. My goodness, I mean, when I took over as editor in 2010, and we do our annual statistics about where we get the papers from, and it was predominantly, Western countries, US, UK, Europe, that kind of stuff. Very, very little coming from Asia, for example, or Asia Pacific. And now, if you look at, I've been editor since 2010. It's completely transformed. I think you'll find a lot of the content is actually coming from Asia Pacific. Obviously, still have the US and UK amongst the top ones, but there's for example, China is the top country submitting to GOT and to many other journals by far, not just by a little bit, by far. Like the big chunk of them. And the acceptance rate is also higher than the average for the journal. So the quality that is coming from the Asia Pacific is outstanding. There are lots of excellent papers that come from lots of sites within the Asia Pacific, obviously from Singapore, from China, from Hong Kong, and by collaboration, Japan, Korea, all of these countries, and certainly from Malaysia as part of that consortium, as part of that kind of Asia Pacific work, it always has weight now. So I think that gap is already being bridged. But the way to bridge it for me personally is I am a collaborative person. When I was, before I immigrated to Australia, I was working in the UK, and basically I invested so much time and effort going to Asia Pacific. I used to travel, many times a year to do collaborative work. And that has paid off because we now have so much collaboration with Asia Pacific countries. And that's tremendous because that allows us to diversify and validate the work and make it much, much higher impact. So that's how you do it, by collaboration. Everyone wants to collaborate. As you know, I collaborate heavily with Malaysia, so that's taken for granted, of course.
Okay, thank you. I think we should stand on the giants, shoulder of the giants. I've got some questions for you, Prof. Ahmed. Um, this is about mentoring. Do you think early career researcher should find their own mentor, or the faculty should assign a mentor to them?
Yeah, that's a very, mentorship is a passion of mine, because I was so fortunate and blessed to have amazing mentors. Now, I went knocking on doors. There was nothing available. There was no pathway in those days to find a decent mentor. But because I was genuinely interested in research from when I was a child, I was desperate as an early medical student, second year medical student, knocking on doors. And then somebody took me under the wing. So I was very lucky. I was very fortunate. But now I've learned from that. And I think the way, and I often say this in many of my lectures, is it's a duty and a responsibility of the institutions to create those opportunities. Okay. So as well as, if you're motivated, you will always go and try and find a mentor, and there's no excuse for you not doing it. Don't wait for things to come to you. But it's also the duty of the institutions to create those opportunities, have a mentorship scheme, have those opportunities for students to go and experience research, whether it's in a clinical context or a basic science or whatever it is, being assigned to someone who's going to inspire you. Now, to be able to do this as an institution, you should identify those exemplars of amazing mentors and use them. And it's their duty. I mean, I don't think this is something that they should complain about. It's all about passing the baton or the torch to the next generation. That, because we're all finite, we're all pass off. So, but we've got to get people behind us that will continue that progressive, searching for the truth. So I think that's the ethos that should be adopted by the institutions. And then success breeds success. Those people that will be loyal to you because you've invested in them, you've provided them opportunities, you've mentored them, you've sent them to Harvard and MIT and top universities to acquire new skill, and then they came back, and then they will become excellent mentors, and so forth. That kind of cycle of success. That would be my my approach to it.
Thank you, Prof. Ahmed. One last question. Currently, the H index and citations is a measurement of an impact of a researcher. However, do you think this is really the impact? If not, then what could be how could you measure an impact of certain study or certain research of a researcher to the society?
Yeah, all of these indices are artificial. I mean, and we all recognize this. In fact, journal impact factors are now actually prohibited in any of the grants that we submit here in Australia. If you put it, they will take it out. I mean, that's not what it's all about. It's about real impact. What has this work actually achieved? Has it actually filtered into guidelines of management? Has it actually informed practice? Has it stopped bad practice? All of these things. So there are other ways of assessing impact. Sadly, however, it's very kind of poorly defined new frontier. And at the moment, most institutions are still struggling with how to measure someone's impact in terms of promotions. So H index is still there, but H index is dependent on other people citing your work, and if it's not been cited, it will look as if you haven't done any impactful research, which is not obviously true. There is a move amongst lots of journals to adopt a different type of impact called altmetrics, and that's one you'll see often on these PDFs. This kind of multicolored donut, with different colors that come from. This is not citations; it comes from being picked up by a news outlet or being tweeted or in a blog or whatever. All of these things called an altmetric score for your manuscript. So these are kind of coming along, but in all honesty, we're still far away from having a useful, honest, and truthful assessment of one's impact. However, there are other things that get into this, like the number of patents, for example, or influencing practices. As I said, guidelines. That's very, very important. Your work contributed to that evidence base. These are the kinds of things that for example, if I'm assessing someone, I would think, yeah, they've made a difference. That's much more impactful than the H index. H index is a measure of age. The longer you live, the higher it will go. So it's a bit unfair, inherently unfair.
Thank you so much. I think we come to the end of the talk already. Once again, I would like to thank Prof. Ahmad for the excellent talk and pass back to Dr. Lokman.
Thank you very much to both our moderator, Professor Tan, and our esteemed Professor, Professor Ahmad, for such a wonderful presentation. So we'll be taking a short break, and please join me back at 5 minutes break. So please join me back at 10 past 10 for our next speaker presentation. Thank you. Now we shall resume our session, and the floor would like to invite the moderator, Associate Professor Dr. Wan Hasina Wan Abdul Halim, to present the next speaker of the day on the topic of what do I look for in a manuscript as a journal chief editor, top 10 tips. Now, our associate professor is a consultant ophthalmologist who specializes in cornea and anterior segment and is actively running clinical trials, corneal transplants, and works on corneal and limbal stem cell regeneration. Now, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the associate professor, Dr. Wan Hasina Wan Abdul Halim.
Assalamu alaikum and a very good morning to everybody. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Today, I'm very privileged to make known Professor Aung Tin, who is our invited speaker for today during this distinguished professor lecture in conjunction with the 23rd Medical Faculty Research Week. So it's my privilege to introduce Prof. Aung Tin. He's currently the Executive Director of the Singapore Eye Research Institute, the Deputy Medical Director, and the Vice Chair of Research in Singapore National Eye Centre. Other than a senior consultant, he's also a professor in the Department of Ophthalmology of Yong Lu Lin School of Medicine, National University of Singapore, and also Kwan Im Ton Hood Chu Temple Professor of Ophthalmology in the Duke NUS Medical School, Singapore. Professor Aung Tin is a clinician sub-scientist who's well known in the world of ophthalmology, especially in the area of glaucoma. I still remember when during my student days being in awe to all these big guns in the ophthalmology world, and I can't believe today that I'll be introducing you to this session. So Professor Aung Tin has been awarded with many research grants, in total more than 20 million grant in competitive research. And he has received numerous awards, including the Robert Rich Award for Excellence in Innovation in Glaucoma from the Glaucoma Foundation in 2017. As an esteemed member of the editorial boards of many journals, such as Ophthalmology, Eye, Journal of Glaucoma, Progress in Retina and Eye Research, Graphe in Archive of Clinical and Experimental Ophthalmology, and other journals, he is the right person to talk about our title today. So I welcome Professor Aung Tin.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank the organizers for inviting me. And can you see my slides? Yep, okay. So I've been invited to give a talk on what do I look for in a manuscript, and I'm giving you some insights as an editor. So as Professor Wan Hasina has mentioned, I'm from Singapore, and I have appointments at the National University of Singapore at Yong Lu Lin School of Medicine, as well as at the Duke NUS Medical School. And this is a picture of my hospital in Singapore, the Singapore National Eye Centre. And we see about 350,000 patients a year. And I had the Singapore Eye Research Institute, which is a building across from the Singapore National Eye Centre. And we have about staff of about 240 people, and we have about almost 50 PhD scientists, and we work on a budget of about 25 million. So I published more than 600 papers, and I'm on the editorial board of these journals. And some of them have quite a high impact factor, like Progress Retina Eye Research is now impact factor of 21, and Ophthalmology is like 12. So it's quite good for an eye journal. Usually eye journals have not such a high impact factor, and also review for many other journals. So I think, as you know, there's a peer review process in most journals. And of course, when you receive a submission, the journal checks the formatting, and then they will alert the submission to either the editor or the editorial board member. So it depends on the system by the journals. Some journals, the editor will assign an editorial board member who will then decide whether to reject without review, or they will then send for review. And a lot of journals nowadays, they are doing a first cut where they reject without review, especially for certain papers which are not very strong, or they don't even want to even send for review. And of course, if they send for review, usually they will look for at least 2 peer reviews, and sometimes 3. And then when the reviews are received, of course, the editorial board member will then decide, and then finally the editor will decide with a decision. And of course, usually the reviewers are experts in the field, but often it could be quite junior people who are reviewers, because it's not easy to find reviewers, especially in certain topics. And and in terms of there's a bit of bias, or usually in terms of the authors as well, whether the authors are established authors versus unknown authors. So of course, those who are more established, they tend to get slightly, I would say, more positively influenced in that way. So there's a bit of bias even at this stage, because usually, they look at the track record as well. So that helps if you're very established. Now, of course, you have different parts of the paper, and I think other speakers have talked about how the different sections of the paper. But, roughly when you evaluate the paper, you look at, of course, the main question of the paper. I mean, what is the reason for doing the study and the aims? And of course, we look at the protocol, the outcome measures, the way that an analysis was done, the interpretation, and the conclusions. I'll go through some of these points in more detail. So overall, I would say that what papers are accepted or rejected. So of course, those which cover an important subject would have higher chance. So something which is very new and original, something even very topical, is a very high chance of acceptance. And of course, it has to be relevant to the journal's readers. So for example, in the last 1 year, of course, COVID papers are very topical. And so, of course, a lot of papers on top of COVID would have a higher priority. And in ophthalmology, of course, there are some so-called more interesting or hot trends, like, in the last couple of years, a lot of papers on, for example, artificial intelligence is interesting. A lot of papers on new treatments, such as, new anti-macular degeneration medication. So something very new and original would always have a priority. And in terms of relevance to journal readers, as I said, if it's very esoteric topic, then it may not be of interest to a general ophthalmology general journal. So let's say if you're talking about something very small or something very technical, then you send it to ophthalmology, they will straight away reject it, because it has to be of interest to the journal's readership. The journal readership are usually general ophthalmologists, and particularly those in the US. And so, if it's something very esoteric, then they will not be relevant. So they will tell you, okay, send it to your specialty journal. Of course, the paper has to be well written. And if you read through the paper quickly and you see a lot of grammatical errors or very poorly written paper, then of course, it's very negative already. And as I said earlier, a topical subject is always nice to have. It could also be sometimes a neglected area. So when you mention it in the introduction, for example, you should talk about how it's a neglected area. Of course, journals like to see articles that are going to be highly cited, and this is important as well. So, for example, latest trials, latest RCTs, new medications, new devices, for the first time they're reported. These will be very highly cited, and so these will be of interest to journals. And of course, the clinical importance for clinical journals, as I mentioned earlier. And if it's very basic science, then you shouldn't send to a clinical journal, and vice versa. I think somebody may have talked about the levels of evidence and study designs. As you know, case reports and case series would be of low priority, and it goes all the way, of course, down the list. And RCTs would have higher priority. Even RCTs, you have to look at the quality of the RCT, and look at the sample size, the power calculation, as well as masking and other factors. So I won't go through this. I think probably the other speakers talking about clinical trial design. And then of course you have systematic reviews, meta-analysis. These are also will be of interest, particularly some of the journals which have more taking summary papers or review papers. Yeah. So what I rejected, okay, of course, as I mentioned earlier, the opposite of what I said, not important topics, not new or novel, and not sufficiently interesting for the journal's readership. Okay, so sometimes, let's say you wrote a paper which is very, or let's say retina specific, but it may not be taken by a general journal like ophthalmology, but you may go to a retinal journal. So you have to aim at the right readership. Of course, a poor methodology, and I will mention this in a while later, is, of course, one of the reasons why it'll be rejected. Or the findings may be difficult to apply clinically for a clinical journal. I mean, if there's no clinical implication, then it won't be accepted. Not well written, of course, will be rejected. And as I mentioned earlier, too subspecialized. Okay. Yet another paper amongst many is a very common topic. So if you are going to be the 100th paper looking at a particular topic, then not interesting as well. And of course, they also do a plagiarism check. And if there's a very high rate of plagiarism in the paper, then this will be rejected as well. Sometimes you'll be surprised when you get a paper, they will show you, there's a software that tells you a plagiarism percentage, and sometimes it's like 30, 40, 50%, and then of course it will be rejected. Yeah. So some tips for the writer, of course. Firstly, you must know the literature very well, okay? And so you must be able to talk about what are the knowledge gaps and what are the new questions or what are the unanswered questions or gaps that need to be addressed. And that's why it's very important that if you know literature, you can sell your paper to the journal. So by, for example, even in the letter to the, when you submit a paper, you normally have to submit overview letter of submission. And in that letter also you can write something about why is this paper important, yeah? And this is number one, helps you to sell to the journal editor. Some people would even call up the journal editor before they submit the paper to sell to them how important the paper is. So that is a little bit extreme, but I've known that people have emailed me, for example, before they submit the paper and said, I want to submit this paper and it's very important for these reasons, and do you think you'll be interested in this in the paper? So this is something which is quite extreme, and usually most editors will just say, yes, it sounds interesting, and they'll probably be quite diplomatic, because unless they see the paper, they can't make a judgment. Yeah. And so, some tips here, of course, by reading the conclusions and discussion of other papers, you will know what the knowledge gaps. By reading reviews and editorials, you will also know the knowledge gaps. And also by reading the limitations of other papers, when they write a paper, they write about the limitation of the study, you can come up with potentially new questions. Of course, you must be able to know the literature and know the background very well, and especially know the existing knowledge and theories. So if you're not sure, and then if you don't know how to write the paper, you should talk to people, and of course do a very good PubMed search, of course. Now, probably the most important part of the paper is why you did the paper, why you did the study is probably the most important part. What is the study question and what is your hypothesis, okay? And usually we will read the introduction, and you understand straight away in the introduction, why was the study done and what was the reason, okay? And if you quickly read the introduction and you see, right, if you say like, okay, I'm doing it because it's only done in Europeans and never done in Malaysia, then not so interesting straight away, you know what I mean? So, but if you do it because there's a big gap, or there's controversy, or there's something unknown, or something new, or something you don't know what is the evidence, and then you have a good hypothesis, that'll be interesting. So straight away, in the introduction already, we will read quickly, and why was the study done and what was the hypothesis, okay? And straight away you will know, okay, what is the exposure or what's the outcome? These are some examples I give you where it's a risk factor versus disease outcome. And straight away you'll know the main thing that you're looking at quickly. Language is very important, write in the active voice, and also talk about the good simple sentences, not too many abbreviations, and of course grammar and spelling is very important, okay? And the tenses as well. Okay, so nothing worse than a poorly written paper. Okay, and apart from the introduction, I think the abstract is also very, very important, because the abstract is the first impression, and many journal editors will decide what to do based on the abstract alone. Okay, whether for example to reject without review, they will look at the abstract and probably the introduction of the paper and just glance through the rest. Okay. So the abstract is very important. And don't forget, even later on, if your paper is published, many people who read journals only look at abstracts. Okay? And then from the abstract, they decide whether to read the paper. So if your abstract is poor, then you cannot capture the essence of a paper. So it has to be able to stand on its own. And of course, don't forget, the conclusion of abstract should be supported by the data presented. Okay, so abstract is very important. Yeah, people always think that abstract is the last thing they do, and they don't spend much time on the abstract, but actually it's wrong. Abstract is very important, and you need to spend a lot of time on your effort on the abstract. As I mentioned earlier, the study design is very important, and I mentioned to you the levels of evidence. And of course, the basic things in study design must also be there. What was the study design, who was studied, when and where, and what was the exposure, and how were they measured, and how were they defined, what was the outcome, how were they measured, how were they defined. So you'll be surprised at how basic things like this are not covered by many papers. Yeah. So let's say they say, okay, they're looking at the outcome was intraocular pressure, but they don't even define how was it measured, when was it measured, how many times, by who. These are simple, very basic things which you need to be very explicit and clear. What was the outcome, what was the exposure, and how were they measured and how they were defined. Many people do not define things and do not define the important things like the outcome measure. Yeah. And of course, remember to adjust for confounding factors. And when you have a major confounding factor, then straight away your analysis becomes problematic. And of course, the statistical method is also important. Now, abbreviations must be defined, especially when they're first used. And don't use too many abbreviations, because too many abbreviations is very confusing for the reader. They have to look almost like a glossary to find what the abbreviations are. Okay, so for statistical data, I think, just state the statistical analysis that was done, especially the primary and the subsidiary analysis, and what was adjusted for and the values, as well as decimal places. No need to go to so many decimal places, usually up to 2 or 3 decimal places is good enough. And give you some examples here for statistical importance. Yeah. Now, when you present the review, the results, of course, you should provide an easy way of reading the results. So an overview first, then you go to specific data, and the direct data with the statistical significance must always be there. The main outcome measures, of course, must be there. And of course, it's good to have figures and tables rather than have a long paragraph describing the results. Okay, and the most important data must be described. Even if it's in a table, you should still write it in the results. And do not assume that the reviewer can immediately see the important points in the figure or table. So if your table is a very complicated table, you must still write in the results section the main findings of the table. So you say table 1 shows blah, 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 table 2 shows blah, blah, but you must write the main things, right? And of course, you have to interpret the data and draw the conclusions for the reader, okay? They can't expect the reader to interpret the table themselves. Yeah, it's better to interpret the main findings in the table. And of course, look at the tables. Now, for discussion-wise, I think, it's probably not as important as the rest of the paper, but of course, is to make it complete, it has to be interesting, okay? And I recommend usually the 6 C's in discussion. I mean, if you don't know what to write in the discussion, these are the 6 C's I recommend. First is to clarify. Clarify means you summarize your main findings. Compare means you compare your data with previous data or previous other published literature. Consider means you consider what explains your observations or your results. Contribution means how it contributes to the knowledge or to the scientific literature, and what is new, what your study contributes, what is new that you are bringing to the reader. Of course, cons means the limitations, and finally, conclusions. Okay, so if you don't know how to write discussion, I think remember these 6 C's, and you just fill out 1 paragraph each, you will have a good discussion. Yeah. Of course, the most important, of course, is the contribution, right? What it contributes, what you have contributed from your study. Yeah. Now, references, I think, don't put too many references. I mean, you need to selectively choose the important references. And of course, the important ones, which have like the big RCTs, for example, or the major findings are good to include. And of course, cite the key articles. Now, I don't agree that some people say that, if you are submit to ophthalmology, try to cite ophthalmology papers. I don't think it's necessary, but I'm not sure. I don't think people are looking at that. Okay, but some people talk about potential reviewers. Perhaps, if you're going to write on a topic where the chances of it being reviewed by a person who is like very hot in the field, or who has written the main done the main trial related to the field, and so there's high chance that that reviewer may be the one, that person may be the one reviewing a paper. Of course, if you don't cite the main important paper, of course, it's a big problem. Yeah. So I think, I don't think you need to cite it multiple times, but I think you definitely have to cite the important ones. Now, as I mentioned earlier, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So it's always good to have a nice figure which captures your data nicely. And it's better to have one figure than 2 or 3 tables. And of course, tables are also nicer than lots of text. Yeah, so important to think about the figures and the tables. So the final checklist, of course, is whether does a paper read well? Is it interesting? Are the sentence structures simple and easy to understand? Is the formatting correct, accurate? Are the references okay? Are they good references and important references? And you read the paper, and you ask your friend to read it. If your friend can understand it, if your friend who's not in the field understands it, then you have a good chance. Yeah. If your friend read it and don't understand what you're doing, then of course it's a problem. Yeah. And of course, if it's a general journal, then you can show it to like your friends who are not even ophthalmologists. Yeah. So for example, if you're going to submit to an ophthalmology journal and it's on a glaucoma, you can ask your retinal friend to read it, and you see the retinal person understand it, and then it's suitable for a general journal. If you're going to send to let's say a Lancet or JAMA, where it's a general readership, then you must ask your GP to read it, or ask your friend who is not even in specialty to read it and see whether they understand it, because that is going to be even more easy to understand for a general readership. Okay. And of course, you have to ask yourself, if you were the editor, will you publish the paper? Now, I'll then go and talk a little bit about reviews, okay, and how to respond to a review. Now, remember, you submitted a paper, and let's say you survived, and the paper was not rejected, and you got some reviews. The reviews are back, and then you need to then address the revisions, okay, the reviews. Now, don't forget, just because you have a revision doesn't mean you'll be automatically accepted. You have to spend a lot of time figuring out how to answer the review and the revisions, okay? And don't try to figure out who the reviews are. It's a waste of time, okay? So to respond to a review, you have to compose a detailed and specific rebuttal letter. So every single point in the review has to be addressed and responded to. You cannot ignore certain points, okay? And address each comment sequentially, okay? And usually you should submit a table. The table will say, you write the comment, the first column, the second column is your response, and third column is the changes that you made, okay? And so that's easy to see. And then you also, most journals will ask you to submit a manuscript version, which shows the changes that are tracked, and then and one is just clean, okay? So this is quite standard. Now, try to comply with requests for changes, okay? So if they ask you to do this, you try your best to comply to what they asked for, okay? And also to address the reviewers' comments. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit more about this. Now, there's some scenarios, okay? The best scenario, of course, is that the reviewer comments are easily accommodated. That's the best. Everything they ask for, you know the answer, you can respond, okay? You can make the changes, very easy, right? No need to argue, whatever they ask for, just do it, right? Now, the second scenario, of course, is difficult. They ask for more data. And of course, you can provide it, that's great. Maybe it'll take you 1 or 2 weeks or 1 or 2 months. You can tell the editor, maybe you need more time, and you can provide the data requested. That's fantastic as well, okay? The third scenario is more data requested but not available. It will take you years to do it. Then it's difficult. You need to start thinking about how you can respond to this. Then, of course, you have difficult comments, and then you finally have disagreements. So let's go through some of the scenarios. Okay? Now, the difficult review, of course, is a review asks for too much work, okay? And maybe work that you're planning for the next time, for the future, okay? And so this is where you have to be, straightforward to the reviewer as well as to the editor and say, look, these are very good suggestions, but it's beyond the scope of the manuscript. And it will take you the next 1-2 years to do it, for example. So this is a way of saying, hey, give me a break. Yes, you're a fantastic review, fantastic comments, but these are not beyond the scope of this paper, okay? And so sometimes when you write the paper, you can actually precede them by saying that these are areas of future work in your discussion. So, if you suspect your reviewer going to ask you to do this, that, you can even write that in the discussion that as part of future work, I'm doing this, so that you preempt the reviewer from bringing this comment. Okay, so this one you try. Now, some journals will say, sorry, you don't do this, cannot. For example, they say they want replication. Okay, and like some journals say you must replicate one more time. If you don't do it, I'm not going to accept it. Now, then you're finished. So you must do the replication. If not, you'll be rejected. Yeah. Now, some journal reviewers, they want to be difficult. They say, oh, delete this figure, delete this table, whatever. Okay, that one, you try to comply, okay? And sometimes you can put them into supplementary. That means it doesn't go into the main text, but it's a supplementary online only. So that's easy. So, but if you're really important, you can try to argue and say, really, this is very important, and do not remove it. Okay, but usually we will try to comply, okay, because you just go to supplementary. Now, the last one is the disagreement. Okay, this is the most difficult one. Okay, you don't agree that the change is warranted, and you must justify why you don't want to make the change. Okay, and this is important, and this is very difficult. But probably in one review, you can do this once, or maybe twice. Okay, but if there are 10 points revision, you 5 of them you say I don't agree. Finish. You're not going to be accepted. Yeah. So it's a peer review process. Peer review process means you must listen to the peer review and try to accommodate. So maybe you can argue one time that the change is not warranted and you don't want to do it. Okay. Now remember, do not be emotional or derogatory or confrontational. I've seen some of my juniors, they write review, they say, the reviewer is obviously misguided. This kind of thing, no point, right? No point writing this kind of thing, okay? Just making people angry for nothing, yeah. Sometimes you may say, the reviewer may not have understood, or be diplomatic, okay? Compliment the reviewers for the good suggestions, be neutral, okay? But you must be diplomatic, okay? And maybe you can say things like, the reviewer may have missed this point, or the reviewer may not have noticed this, or something like that. So in that way, is a diplomatic way of saying that the reviewer made a mistake. Yeah, okay. But do not be, confrontational and say the reviewer doesn't know what he's talking about, or the reviewer is misguided. Yeah, this is the kind of thing that no point. You're definitely not going to be helpful for your reviewer, the editor, everybody. Okay, so be nice to the reviewer and to the editor, editorial board member, because don't forget, they are the ones who can make the decision. Yeah. And so try to accommodate as much as possible. And maybe you can disagree 1 or maybe 2 comments, but definitely not more than that. Okay. Now we come to rejection. Okay. So the manuscript is rejected. What can be done? Okay. So usually that's it. Some people, they want to appeal. Okay. I think usually journals don't entertain appeals, but unless it's something really so major that the reviewer completely didn't understand some point, okay, misinterpret the data so badly, okay, and of course people are human, can make mistakes, then yes, you can try to appeal, okay, but most of the time appeals don't really work, okay. So sometimes you can discuss with your colleagues, discuss with your seniors, hey, do you think it's really fair, what I mean? But if your paper is very, very badly written, there are a lot of major things that they point out, no point appealing. Okay, so perhaps you go back and try to improve it for the next journal or do more work, etc. Okay, so no point appealing. Now, sometimes I have colleagues or even my juniors who do not understand why it was rejected. It's clearly written in the review what the problems were, but they say like, it's okay, what, like nothing. So, there are a lot of people who have this, maybe some bias. Okay, so they are biased already. They like, the paper is already pretty clearly this paper is have some major errors, flaws, limitation, and yet the guy thinks that, no, it looks fine to me, and they don't understand, right? So you'd be surprised that sometimes because you are so vested interest in your paper, you have this, you can't even believe that they will reject you. Yeah. So show it to your colleagues. If you just to say, is it correct, or you think it's unfair? Okay. So if you think that it's a major error, then you can write a letter to the editor or to appeal. Okay. Or sometimes you have done more work, then you can come back and say, hey, look, you rejected me because I didn't do this. Now I've done it. Can you reconsider? Okay. So sometimes they may allow. Okay. But most of the time is no. They won't agree. Yeah. So go try elsewhere usually. Okay. Now remember, until your paper is finally accepted, you don't assume that your paper will be accepted. So your revision might be done properly. Sometimes they call for second revision, third revision. Always do your best. Okay. And do in a timely manner. So don't wait till like the last day before the revision is due, then you go and start working on it. Yeah. So you start the moment you get it, you straight away start working on the review. Usually they give 1 or 2 months to come back with the revision. Yeah. So, and if you miss the deadline, sometimes they think, oh, you are not coming back. So they will can the paper. Yeah. They consider it withdrawn. And so you have to resubmit the whole thing. So that's a really bad. So look at the date given for your rebuttal. Okay. And if you need a deadline extension, you can ask the editor, say, look, I need more time. And they will normally give it to you. But if you don't ask, they may think that you are withdrawn or you're not coming back anymore. So then don't miss that deadline. The last time, of course, your paper is accepted. Of course, then you get the proofs. Usually the proofs comes between 6 to 8 weeks before publication. Again, you must be on the ball about this, okay? Because there'll be queries, there'll be spelling checks, there'll be a lot of questions. Again, if you don't respond, your paper may not go through as well. So don't assume that your accepted means that your paper going to come out. Yeah, you have to still address the proofs, and sometimes they need to do some editing as well, or fine tuning during the proofs. So I think that most papers are publishable. It depends on which journal. And of course, the most important thing is your study design and your data, and try to improve your writing technique. Okay. So I think that's all at the end of my talk. I think in conclusion, I think, of course, I made many points about the paper's quality. And also I talked to you about how you must spend a lot of time on the abstract and the introduction. Okay. Why introduction? Introduction is because you're selling the paper. Why is the study question? Why you did it? What was your hypothesis? Okay. If that introduction is terrible, no chance. The people don't even want to read the rest of the paper. Yeah, because they want to know in the introduction why you did the study, what is the question, what is the gap, what's the controversy, and what's your hypothesis, and why you did, in what study you did. Okay, so it has to be very nice in the introduction, and of course in the abstract. Remember to be diplomatic and accommodating in revision, and of course the real responsibility lies with you in doing the good work and then writing the good manuscript. Okay, so that's all I have for my talk today, and I'm happy to entertain questions, and I see a few in the chat. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. Tin. What a wonderful tips sharing from the chief editor himself. And I would say a lot of the points actually hit home. And I think we should try and entertain the question now. Okay, there's one question, Prof. Tin. In terms of study limitation, how to write this and without making the limitation too obvious that would impact the manuscript would impact in the manuscript rejection in the eyes of the editors.
It's a good point. Yeah. So, when you write your cons of your discussion, you are saying basically, look, guys, I know the study is not perfect, okay? And we acknowledge these limitations. So you can write maybe 3 or 4, okay? But you cannot write like 20 limitations. Then you're killing your own paper also. Yeah, so it's a balance, right? So you got to think about what are the biggest limitations which you can acknowledge, okay? And then you write in a diplomatic way. We acknowledge these were the limitations of the study, okay? And you hope for the best that, some reviewers are very unkind. They look at the limitation and they say, yeah, you didn't do this, just follow exactly what you wrote, And then they say, and then you say, oh, but I already acknowledged it, but they say, yeah, But it's too bad, these are the major limitations, so it's difficult. Yeah. This is like almost bargaining. Yeah. When you write the limited paper, you're like almost bargaining. Yeah. You're saying, these are my errors, or these are things I didn't do properly. Sorry about that. Please forgive me. That's what limitations of the paper are. Yeah. And of course, if the reviewer is very kind, they'll say, yes, the review author has acknowledged the limitations in the study, and and this is unfortunate, but we understand they couldn't do this. This is, So that's a very kind reviewer. Yeah. Mm-hmm. The horrible reviewer will say, just follow exactly what you wrote and say, yeah, the study was limited by this, and then they just kill the paper. Yeah. So unfortunately, I can't give you a good answer. Yeah. So as you said, these are things where you just try and hope. It's a bargaining. Yeah.
So trying to open up the skeleton, but trying not to open too much, is it? So
exactly.
Yeah. So Prof Tin, there's another question by Prof Zima, which I think she asked about: are we allowed to submit our manuscript to many journals at one time? What is your?
No, cannot. They don't allow. Yeah, you have to declare when you submit that you are submitting only this journal. Yeah, at one at a time. Yes. Yeah. Okay, and if they find out you have multiple submissions, you'll be big trouble. They should reject. Yeah.
Especially if you send to the journals by Prof Tin. If Prof Tin spotted one and then there's another one in the other journal, you'll be in big trouble. Yes, another question from me. How do you overcome this researcher writers complex? Because, some of us are trying to make sure that publication is secured by sending it to a lower ranking journal, whereas actually our research are able to reach a much higher ranking journal. How do we how do you address this issue? How would you advise for some of us?
Of course, you should aim for the higher journal first. Yeah. You should try.
But some of us would doesn't like to deal with rejection, or they just want to know that, okay, as long as I manage to get Q3 or Q4, it's fine. It's in the publication anyway. So yeah, I think that's some of the things that are happening to the juniors, and especially young writers, they don't feel confident enough that their article can reach Q1 or Q2 journal.
I mean, I think you have to remember this is part of, writing academic life. Rejection is part of your life. Yeah. So you don't have to be too personally devastated by such things. Yeah. These things happen. Yeah. I mean, I don't think, you have to be thick skin, a bit more resilience. Yeah.
Okay. That's a nice advice, Prof. And there's another question. I think I saw two questions here. There's one by anonymous attendee. Let's say we are talking about theory 1 in our review paper, and the reviewer would like us to discuss theory 2 in that paper too, but the title of the paper is confusing on theory 1. Can we reply the reviewer's comments in the response letter itself without changing the content of the paper? I think this is
if it's a review paper, usually you must review everything. You cannot be only talking about one theory, right? Mm-hmm. So if it's a review paper, you have to review different theories and conflicting, evidence, conflicting theories as well. So I would say that if your review is only about one theory, then it's not a very good review, lah.
Okay.
The next question is: better to have more publication in journal of various rankings, or do you have less publication? Okay. So I mean, it depends on what is your university policy. Yeah, but usually most universities, they look at your top publications. Yeah, so they don't look so much for quantity, but more for quality. Yeah, so I think I'm not sure. I'm sure UKM is similar. They probably look at your top few publications, and of course, if you only have 10 publications, but the 10 are in Nature, then no problem. Rather than 100 or 1,000, and none of them are in the good journal. So I think quality is always more important, than quantity. And I think certainly, you should aim for higher quality, than quantity.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think one last question from me. if you have any tips on making sure that discussion is adequate and impressive, because sometimes we encounter, for example, if you have supervising students, the students are actually have difficulty in making sure that the discussion is deep enough, covering all aspects of the study. And then they usually just explaining it superficially. What is your top tip to make sure that the discussion is deep enough and actually inclusive enough to address the research aim?
It's difficult. I mean, I gave you the 6 C's. These are very good, easy guideline. Yeah. So I always tell my juniors, these are the 6 C's.
Yes.
You stick to these 6 points, you will be a reasonable discussion. But of course, each point you must write nicely, lah. I mean, you cannot just, But of course, the most important one finally is the contribution that you brought to the table. What is your contribution, of course, and of course, you studying the consider is very important. What explains your findings, and also looking at the previous literature, how it compares to previous. So it's quite straightforward. Discussion is actually quite easy to write usually. Yeah. First paragraph, you write your main findings. Second paragraph, you write compare to the literature. The third paragraph is explain why you found it. The next one is, your contribution. You could be different order as well. You put your contribution last or just before the conclusion also can. You know what I mean? The limitation, and then why is your paper unique? What is the strength of your paper? What is your contribution? And then finally the conclusion. So it's really discussion actually not difficult to write.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much, Prof. Altin. I mean, you have done shared with us very useful and I think beneficial tips for all the lecturers, even to the students today. Thank you very much, Prof. Altin. So I'll pass it back to the moderator.
Thank you.
Thank you. We thank both the moderator as well as our esteemed professor for those excellent publication tips. All right, so moving onwards, the floor would like to invite the next moderator, Dr. Amelia Aminuddin, to introduce our final speaker for the day on the topic of do and don'ts of publishing in high impact journal. Dr. Amelia is a senior lecturer from the Department of Physiology. Her work focuses on human cardiovascular research, which include exercise, physiology, markers of vascular functions, and screen or CVD risk factors. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Amelia Aminuddin to present the next speaker. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Muhammad Luqman.
Right.
Okay, it is a great honor for me to introduce our last speaker, Prof. Emeritus Datuk Dr. Wan Zurina Wanengah. Okay, Prof. Datuk was awarded Professor Emeritus by University Bangsa Malaysia in 2017 after serving UKM for 39 years. While in service at the Faculty of Medicine, she held various administrative posts, including Head of Department, Deputy Dean of Academic Affairs, and Deputy Director of Research at UMB. She led the faculty during a major curriculum review in the year 2000, which is the format of the present curriculum. She was a UKM Senate member and was given the honor to represent the Senate as a member of the University Board of Directors, which is the highest governing board of the university. She was also an internal auditor to the Vice Chancellor for MIRA and self-accreditation. She was awarded the Excellent Service Award 6 times and was the first faculty members to receive the Faculty Research Leader Award in 2005. She is active in medical education and was a consultant to universities, such as UMS, UNIMAS, and USIM, for their development of their medical faculty. She was a member of MQA for the accreditation of medical programs and has extensive experience as an external examiner for the various medical faculties. Currently, she is serving as the lead academic consultant to the Maldives National University in the implementation of the Doctor of Medicine degree program, which is a project with UKM. In terms of research field, she has been published more than 200 papers and received nearly 5,000 citations. She has been sub-editor for Scientific Report, which is a Nature publishing a few years ago. Her research interests include oxidative stress, inflammation associated with degenerative diseases, and aging. She also studied several modulators, such as palm tocotrienols, in animal models and humans. Her research studies is on neurodegenerative disease and the use of palm tocotrienols as supplementation in this disease in humans and mouse models. She studied relevant mechanisms involved at transcriptome, proteome, and metabolome levels. With that such impressive background, I would like to invite Prof. Emeritus Dr. Wan Zurina Wanengah to give her talk titled Do and Don'ts Publishing in High Impact Journal. Welcome, Prof.
Thank you, Dr. Amelia, for the very kind introduction. Allow me to share my slide. I'd like to start off by thanking the organizing committee, Dr. Haikal, and also the rest of the organizing committee, Prof. Haslina, for the invitation to speak. Can you all see my slide now? Yeah? Okay, so do's and don'ts of publishing in high impact journals. I think you've heard quite a bit about what to do to publish in high impact journals. So I'll just give from Prof. Ahmad as well as Prof. Ong Ting. But from sort of experience, I will be sharing with you some of my experiences in terms of trying to publish when I started, which was some years ago, and from almost nothing. So probably to start off with, I'll just provide a very brief overview of what is meant by high impact journals for the benefit of some of the newer researchers. Our journals, currently there are thousands, but many of them, there are several thousands, are actually listed in the WOS, World of Science, and they have a list of the journals, the names of the journals according to their impact factor. So if you see here, the highest impact factor is actually 508, and this is the top journal in terms of impact factor IF. So when we want to publish in high impact journals, we try to go for as high an impact factor as possible. So impact factor, this is overall in terms of the listing, but the impact factor could also be ranked by disciplines. So for instance, I'm giving here an example for ONG, for instance. There are the top ranking journal for ONG is Human Reproductive Update with an impact factor of 12.8. So you can see that the impact factor varies, and if they rank from the highest to the lowest, and depending on the number of journals within that discipline, you can actually divide into 4, so that the first quarter will be in Q1. So say a discipline has got 30 journals in that discipline. So the first 6 will be Q1 divided by 4. The second will be Q2. The third quarter will be Q3, and the last one will be Q4. So that is how we identify impact factors and quartiles, Q1 to Q4. So when we're trying to publish in high impact journals, as Prof. Ahmad mentioned just now, it starts from the planning of the research. So the research has to be of high quality in order to get publication in a high quality journal. And there are ways to improve the research that we conduct. We could discuss it with mentors in terms of the planning, starting from the planning, from the very beginning, discussing with different relevant disciplines. If we want to do something we want to venture into, say, molecular biology, it is good to have a molecular biologist on board. And if we are going to have to do something with tissues, then we will need a pathologist. So we have to discuss all these requirements at the beginning of the planning of the research. And also a very important aspect is collaboration and international if possible. I also mentioned, and this has been also emphasized by Prof. Ahmad. The second, after the research is done, and hopefully the research is of high quality, you have to assess the findings. Sometimes we do the research based on our hypothesis, but we did not get the results that we expected. And so we have to look at the findings that we obtain, and how significant is the finding, how complete is the data, and we have to look at the literature and what is present in the journals that we intend to publish in. The third one is actually choosing the right journal. We have to choose to be able to choose, and the choosing of the right journal has to be done at the beginning of the of writing the paper, yeah, and it has to address the correct target audience. And of course, the acceptance of the journal of the publication depends, as mentioned earlier, quality of manuscript, the right angle in terms of the approach, in terms of trying to highlight what is novel about your findings, because the novelty is what gets paper published. And for us who are non-native English-speaking researchers, then we might have to do a little bit of language editing. Yeah. So, but there are getting to publish in a high-impact journal will take time. Yeah, it may take years if you're a very young researcher in a new, fairly new university, and you are targeting to publish in Q1 and Q2 journals. But there are things that one could do to a little fast track a little bit to the publishing in a high impact journal. And the fast track, one of the things is actually the environment in which the research is done. So if you are in Malaysia and your lab is fairly new, or you do not have very established labs, so maybe you could collaborate and join and establish a laboratory overseas. And that laboratory has an environment of already publishing in high impact journals. So that, and you are joining a very established group. So then you can actually, just join and try to get the publication going. And this is okay if, say, you are already, you have done your PhD or your degree overseas. So try to maintain ties with your previous supervisor so that then you will get a head start. So this is one of the things that you need to do, is actually to continue the collaboration. But if you are a fairly young researcher and you do not, who would want to collaborate with you, then probably you have to start with, international collaboration. And I will elaborate a little bit in terms of international collaboration that can take place. The international collaboration can be at the research planning or the manuscript writing stage. So at the research, sometimes in Malaysia, for instance, some of our researchers, they can get a publication in high impact journals by providing samples to big consortiums overseas, and then the papers get published in, say, New England Journal of Medicine or JAMA. But that's fine, that's a good start, but perhaps the collaboration can be expanded so that what is done overseas can actually be replicated in Malaysia, so that Malaysia will have labs and will have research that will be where the quality can be improved in. So this can contribute to the proliferation of research. So try to bring home some of the research culture so that we can actually progress and we can improve. And the collaboration can be in the form of applying for grants, for instance, for students exchange, for expertise, for transfer of technology, and then perhaps your lab can then be turned into a center of excellence, which is the way to go in an academic institution and to get publications in high impact journals. So in terms of publishing in high impact journals and collaboration with international, you can write papers or you can do reviews together. If you do reviews together, then you have access to high impact journals, and your collaborator could be an editor in GAT, for instance, like Prof. Iman, and maybe you can write publications, you can write papers together. There are other activities where you can collaborate that can contribute to the research and to the advancement or progression of your career in research. This could include conferences, attending conferences, workshops, and accepting invitations to speak. Yeah. So I mentioned just now that if you are just starting out and you actually pursued your postgraduate locally. So who will want to collaborate with you from internationally? So the way to get this will be to start a local collaboration. Local collaboration, if you have already, there are people in your institution who are already publishing in high impact journals like Q1 and Q2, for instance. Then you join and learn from the high performing individuals, and as well as and learn from them. Or you seek groups or join centers that are not groups or centers who has got that culture of publishing in high impact journals. Yeah. So that will be the way to go if you for local collaboration. The other way is actually to try, if you're fairly new and you think that you need a mentor. So you should get a mentor either locally or internationally. But for local, try to identify mentors. A mentor doesn't have to be somebody who is near to you in your department, for instance. If there are no researchers in your department, then maybe you should look out to other departments or other faculties or other universities. Yeah. So not limited to just where mentors who you are near to you. So I would suggest looking for other mentors, and the mentors can do all the things that mentors are supposed to do, like helping you to apply for grants in your paper writing and so on in terms of progression. Okay, so path to publication, original articles. Yeah, original articles are articles that are where you write in your findings of your research. Yeah, research that you do in the university. So you, from the planning, from the quality, from the conduct, present at conferences if possible. And when you present at conferences, you sometimes get reviews at the conference and suggestions on how to improve your research. And then choosing the right journal, writing quality manuscript, and then submission to the high impact journal. Yeah. So, but if it is for reviews, you have to identify topic of interest, because you could be trying to publish in a high impact journal, but where you are submitting a review. But this usually happens after you have gained some experience publishing original articles, and you already have some reputation. Yeah, and you might get invitations to write a review. So identify the topic of interest, choosing the right journal, and write to the journal. If it is optional, you could actually write to journals and ask whether they're interested to publish a review that you are planning to write. And submitting, sometimes you have to choose the reviewers as well to review your journal. Sometimes the journal actually asks you to choose the reviewers yourself, but sometimes they have their own panel of reviewers, and writing the quality manuscript. So the second thing is, once the research is done, do evaluate your findings. Yeah. So check on the quality of findings. How significant are your findings? How novel? Does it answer a pressing problem or an important problem? Is it complete? Because if you look at high impact journals, sometimes the one paper contains in vitro studies, contain many studies, human studies, animal studies, as well as in vitro studies, including using many types of cell lines. But sometimes in Malaysia, we are limited by our funding, and we only have money to do one cell line, which might be then limit your study. So see how significant, how confident are you about your results that you have obtained, and the type of study. Usually for longitudinal studies, for instance, the value is more. And the strengths of findings, for instance, number of samples, for instance. If you have a sample, you can see overseas and in the New England Journal of Medicine, the samples are thousands, and you cannot compete with that. So maybe, we have to look for something with journals of a lower impact factor. Yeah. So this is what is need to do when you evaluate your findings. So again, I think this was mentioned by Prof. Tin. Yeah, key characteristic of scientific writing is clarity, and you have to state your facts as simply as possible, even boldly, and no one wants flowers or eloquence or literary ornaments in a research article. So mention this about choosing the right journal, the appropriate journal. And usually, if you're not quite sure which journal to choose from, seek advice from a senior person, a more senior person, or probably from your mentor also. And usually start with a higher impact factor. And then if it is rejected, try to look at the comments given by the reviewers of that journal, and then improve on your manuscript, and then resubmit to another journal of a slightly lower impact factor. And that is the way to go in terms of when trying to choose the right journal. So this may take some time, okay, in terms of choosing the right journal and getting your paper findings published. So again, weigh contents of paper, take the lawyer approach at the results and interpret the results. Interpret the results and not just mention that the results are high and low. What do the results indicate when they are high or when they are low? So identify uniqueness of findings, highlight need for the study and the strength of the research obtain, and triangulate angle of approach for the paper. Yeah, if you're doing something that is everybody seems to know, but what is novel, what is unique about your study? And if you're uncertain, discuss with mentors or peers, yeah, in order to publish. So I mentioned this. Sometimes, sometimes you are in a dilemma. You're doing something on, say, redox biology. On oxidative stress and all that, and it is in relation to ENT, and then you are not quite sure whether you want to publish in a redox biology journal or an ENT based journal. But if it is, my observation is that if it is something molecular and the ENT journal accept molecular studies, then the ENT journal will usually be, the value might be higher with the ENT journal because it is molecular, and maybe the ENT journal will have a higher impact factor. So that might be something to consider very seriously when choosing which journal to publish in. Okay, you have to decide early. Actually, decide the journal to publish before drafting the paper, because the different journals have different requirements and different formats, and the approach might be different for the different types of journals as well. And so some factors to consider when choosing: audience, prestige, access, impact, publication, and acceptance. Yeah. Second is actually, once you have decided on the journal that you want to publish in, you have to be obsessive about the paper, the manuscript that you submit. Obsessive meaning you have to follow the journal's instructions to authors, and it should be free of any grammatical errors, or any grammatical might be difficult because if you're non-English speaking individual, but spelling errors, because there are so many ways to check for spelling now available. So you have to be obsessive, and you have to make sure that everything, those minor technical details are taken care of. And there are ways I've just included in terms of some instructions to journal, and you have to follow, I just mentioned here, the instructions to the letter. If they say the abstract shouldn't be more than 250 words, then you have to make sure that your abstract has got less than 250 words. Yeah. Some practical tips: cite some papers from the same journal and indicate the journals, and this serves to actually indicate the journal's suitability to publish your paper, because the paper has published work similar to what you have done before. Some factors to consider, so interest, suggestions, the discussion with mentor. Mentor should be able to advise you in terms of the paper to choose, the journal to choose from to publish, as well as I had a mentor, Prof. Khalid Kadi, who actually edited my papers before submission to the journals, and he's very experienced, so he can see probably the things that you cannot see. And as a young researcher, that really helped a lot in terms of getting your work published. Choice of title should also be attractive, and usually the title must be short and it reflects the content of the paper as accurately as possible. Abstract has been mentioned a few times, how important the abstract is, because as Prof. Imad mentioned, editors usually just read the abstract before they decide whether to actually send for review or to just reject the paper. So this is really important. And just something, reading scientific article isn't the same as reading a detective story. We want to know from the start that the butler did it. Yeah, we want to know exactly. So the finding should be in the abstract. Yeah, I've included some details on what should be included in the introduction, for instance. Yeah, how it is done for the benefit of many of the students in the audience. But I probably would not go into detail. Yeah, I've just included as something that you might want to refer to in terms of. So a good introduction need not be very long. Could be about 4 to 5 paragraphs long. That's all. But the important thing is actually to identify what is the problem or the question that you're trying to address in the paper. Okay. Materials and methods should be chronological. So, and sufficient information for the reviewer of your paper to assess that what was the work done. Yeah. And the design is there in the materials and methods. Yeah. So, and it must contain the study design. Okay, so I've just included some generic subheadings sometimes that you may need in order to write a paper, but a good tip would be to get a recent copy of a paper from the journal that you are thinking of submitting to, because they will have the appropriate layout that is required to follow. Yeah. So results is to state data obtained, and usually it is chronological and not sequential. And you usually put the results from important to least important. If things are not significant, you need not include all the data that are not significant. You can just say this parameter is actually not significant and data not shown. Yeah, because sometimes you have got too many tables that you might want to. So to emphasize results, yeah, data shouldn't be in the text. Text is your interpretation, and you have to keep your results as brief and as concise as possible. Yeah, and the methods and the results should correspond to each other. Okay, so Prof. Ong Ting said that the discussion is fairly easy to write. But the complaint that I usually get from my students is that the discussion is the hardest section to write. So probably because of the experience that they have to probably learn and gain experience from writing papers. Yeah. So present principles, relationships, and generalizations are shown by results, and to avoid what people have reported as the squid technique. Yeah? The author is doubtful about his facts or his reasoning and retreats behind a protective cloud of ink. Okay. Discussion. Okay. Some things on what to include in the discussion. State answers to questions. Support the answers. Explain why answer is reasonable. Defend if necessary by using pros and cons, and explain the results. Establish the newness of the answer. This is the contribution, I think, that Prof. Ong was referring to. Explain discrepancies, unexpected findings, and validity of assumptions, and state and explain limitations, and state the importance of the answer in that sequence. Yeah. So this is sort of a layout of what should be in the beginning of the discussion. Yeah. And then the middle of the discussion is topics organized in order dictated by signs from most important to least important topics. Yeah, and you have to state, support, explain, and defend. Yeah, so sometimes the discussion can be quite long because it's supposed to discuss your findings in some detail and how, if your findings are significant, how significant, and the contribution that your discussion has made. Yeah. So you end your discussion usually by a conclusion and restate answers and indicate the importance of the answers. Yeah. and by stating the applications of the answer and recommendations. So usually, as a rule, the introduction and the discussion should function as a pair. So you introduce and pose the questions in the introduction, and the discussion tries to answer the question based on your research findings that you have obtained. Yeah. So to also show a relationship among the observed facts. Okay. So this is the conclusion. Your conclusion you must write in. Sometimes it's not a separate section. It's just the last line in the discussion. So fairly detailed. The thing to take a very careful note is actually to mind your references. The references must be correct. Yeah, my old professor used to say that if you refer your wrong references, you can be shot. That's what he said. So that's how important the references are. So cite main scientific publications. Do not use too many references. Yeah, what the number that is appropriate. If it is a review, it's different. For original articles, the number has to be appropriate. And keep self-citations to a minimum, whatever only is relevant. If it is a continuation of a previous work, you can cite your previous work. Avoid excessive citations from publications from the same region. And this is from Elsevier, Science Elsevier. And because the references are fairly tedious to arrange, so learn how to use the reference management software like Mendeley or EndNote. Do take the time to learn so that it will help in terms of your future writing. And don't forget to write proper acknowledgements. Yeah. So for non-native authors, here native refers to non-English speaking natives. Yeah, you can also, it's a requirement for some journals, let's say for non-English speaking authors, please send for English editing. So you could send for English editing, but it can cost quite a bit of money, about 1,000 or something. And otherwise, it's a good idea if the language is a concern. So you just need to choose English editing so that your journal will look very professionally done. Okay. So the next thing to do is actually write a good cover letter. This has been referred to, and start by stating why your paper is suitable for this journal. Include relevant additional background information, but the information is actually not in the abstract. A short description of highlights of your findings. These are the contents that should be in your cover letter. A declaration of any conflict of interest, a declaration that you have not published any part of the journal or submitted the same paper to any other journal. This was in answer to the question that was posted just now. You cannot send multiple copies of the same manuscript to different journals. You have to wait for the journal to be, your manuscript to be rejected first, or any other information as required by the journal. The next one is dealing with rejection. Yeah. Okay. So usually I go by, as long as your paper does not say, thank you for submitting to the journal, I am sorry to say that we have to reject your journal. As long as it doesn't say that, you still have a chance to make the revisions, to make the corrections and improve the quality of paper to be published in that particular journal. So the option usually is very rare that the journal will accept your original paper, because there's always something that you have probably can improve in. Okay, so they will revise, they will ask you to revise and resubmit promptly. So go by the deadlines. Even if the list of comments is really long, don't get disheartened. I have a friend who actually submitted a paper and received the reply and saw 2 pages of comments, and she was so disheartened that she put it into a drawer and did not look at the paper again. But it was, and I only found out later, but I said, as long as this paper is not rejected, you should make the revisions and resubmit accordingly. Yeah. So again, you have to address each is in capital, and every issue. And if you disagree with the requested revision, you can explain why in your letter and look for additional references to back your response. And try to find a different way to solve the problem the editor or reviewer identify. Okay, so I'm just going to show you a review of a paper that I submitted many years ago. I received comments from 2 reviewers. One reviewer had 19 comments, but the second reviewer had only about 2 comments. Yeah, so we responded to each and individual comment and also made the necessary corrections. Yeah, so this is just an example of the things that you have to respond. Yeah, so reviewer 1, so number 1, and we responded accordingly. And number, there's 8 response, there's 14, so 19 responses. And for reviewer 2, there's only 3 that we had to adjust. And after we have done the revision and submitted again to the journal, the paper got published. So it's just an example, like I mentioned just now, to emphasize that as long as the paper is not rejected, it doesn't say that your paper is rejected, try to revise and submit. Recently, another colleague of mine had another paper who was actually asked to revise 4 times. And she finally approached me. I'm a co-author, and she said she's already revised it. This is the 5th revision. So can I have a look? So I looked at the paper, did some, sort of smoothen things, and there was something that the reviewer wanted to be done as additional experiments. But we very nicely said that it is not possible for us to do the additional experiments, and we would appreciate it if they can accept our paper without the additional experiments. And Alhamdulillah, the paper was actually accepted, and it is in scientific reports. So you can see, even after 5 revisions, you can still get your paper accepted in a journal, of fairly high impact. Okay, so dealing with rejection, like just now Dr. Prof. Wan Haslina said, sometimes we get very disheartened. Some of the comments can be very harsh. Some can be quite unkind, but don't take it personally. Yeah, so it's just people. So you just try to improve your paper, learn from the comments, include more data if necessary. If you have the money to do more samples, for instance, just try to do, and then check. If not, if the journal said you are rejected, then check journal down the list and resubmit the paper. We experienced another incident where we submitted a paper to another journal, and they wanted the first round of revision. There was quite substantial things that we had to respond to, and one of the things was that we had to do more samples. Fortunately, we had some money left, so we did another 50 samples to the study, and then after about 4 months, we resubmitted the paper, and this time the same reviewer wrote in that and found other things in the paper that we need to do. So this was very upsetting to us. So I suggested to my colleague, just write in that we think the reviewer is not being fair and maybe a little bit prejudiced and racist. And lo and behold, the next email was, congratulations, your paper has been accepted. So you have to, actually to respond appropriately and knowing the value of what you have in your paper. And if the reviewer is appropriate and the review is appropriate and you have responded accordingly, then it should be taken as such. So in summary, I think in terms of do's, start from quality research. When you want to publish in high impact journals, it has to start from the planning of the research and not just do the research and then suddenly you think that you want to submit to a high impact journal. And don't forget about local and international collaborations. These are really, really crucial to fast track your route to publishing and also to help in terms of your progression of your advancement of your career as a researcher, yeah, and write good quality abstracts, good abstract and high quality manuscripts, a good cover letter. Don't forget to respond appropriately to revisions. I mentioned here about don't practice slicing, ham slicing publications. Yeah, the papers must be of a certain quality and do not go for quantity. Go for quality. Because as mentioned, the paper should be able to tell the whole story and not part of the story, because the other part of the story is in another paper, because you're going for the number of papers. Yeah, and don't give up making corrections. I mentioned, as long as it doesn't come, an email doesn't come saying, I'm sorry, your paper has been rejected. Still do the corrections, the revision, and resubmit. And most importantly, don't give up. Yeah, it's part and parcel of life, and strive hard. I think it's working hard. Yeah, when we want to go, it doesn't come overnight. Publishing in high impact journals, but you gain from experience and you learn some things that you probably that can assist you towards that journey in terms of publication of high impact journals. And final step is to celebrate the publication of your paper, Alhamdulillah, finally. And you cannot imagine the excitement, like I mentioned, or the elation that you feel once your paper has been accepted. You get very excited, and it makes your day, or probably your week or your month, until you have to write the next paper. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm happy to answer questions that you may have. Dr. Amelia?
Okay, thank you, Prof, for the wonderful tips, which is some of it is important for junior lecturer. Okay, for example, you've mentioned about starting with local collaboration first, and then finding a mentor, and then later proceed to international collaboration. However, when we talk about original research, okay, the junior lecturers, actually novice researchers, may take time to establish and to publish in high impact journal. Plus, in the current situation where it's difficult to run research smoothly. Okay, I mean, we talk about original research, okay? So my question is, instead of publishing original research, we focus on review papers. What is your opinion on that?
Okay, that's fine. That's fine if you want to publish a few review papers, that's fine. But don't forget that when you are going to progress as an academic, in the university, you have to have an expertise that is associated with you, in terms of what is your expertise. And original articles makes expertise, not review papers. So we still want to see, you should still focus on original articles and concentrate on doing quality research, and try and write manuscripts to pad your CV. But don't focus too much on your review articles. Strive still to do quality research, because when you want to become professors, then there is something that you should be able to profess, which is your expertise. And that needs research, publishing in original articles in high impact journals. Hope that answers.
Our trademark, is it, Prof?
Yes, what you are expert in. Macam you, like you, Dr. Amila, it will be cardiovascular, isn't it? So research should be in cardiovascular. You can have manuscripts, review manuscripts, but need not be, that cannot be your bread and butter. The reviews cannot be your bread and butter. Your bread and butter must be original articles.
Okay, Prof. Now we go to the Q&A section in the Q&A box. Okay, there is a question from an anonymous attendee. How do we identify and approach high-performing individuals? All that.
Okay. In this day and age, you can just sort of probably Google, in terms of individuals. If you are in the university, for instance, in your field, for instance, you probably can highlight from outside. Say you are in Malaysia, but you are in a fairly young university. you can Google in terms of search words and put Malaysia and your what will be the topic that you're interested in, and I'm sure that individuals will come in, will pop out in terms of the when you Google. So that's one way. The other way is actually to attend conferences related to your field. When you attend conferences, then you know who are the experts. Yeah, you actually at the conferences is a very. If say you are a neuro, you're interested to do neuro, so attend the neuro conferences, and then see who are doing what. Because the conferences are places where people come and present their findings. So and they will look for. Then you can know who to approach. So now in this day and age, the conferences are very flexible because they're online. So you need not go physically to attend, and most of the time they're not very expensive either. So attend as many conferences as possible, local conferences or international, to see who is in your field, and then look around and speak to people. You cannot be sort of sitting in your room and hope that the mentors will come to you. If you are in a department and there are senior people who comes to you, that's fine. But if there are none, then you should go out and look for them. Hope that answers that.
Okay, Prof. There is one question from Dr. Jayakumar. Okay, thank you for an excellent talk, Prof. What's your opinion on the practice of salami slicing in research publications?
Okay.
I think this one is already answered before, right? In your
right. Yeah, I said you shouldn't. I think you shouldn't. If you can, try to avoid ham slicing publications, because when you are trying to apply, say, for promotion, you will be submitting your CV to the university, and the university will be sending your CV to external assessors. And then the external assessors will be able to see the papers that you have to publish. They will actually scrutinize very closely. So if they see that you are practicing this type of, you have this ham slicing publishing habit, then it might reduce their perception of you as a researcher, and might not work positively for your in terms of your assessment of your promotion. Okay, so bear in mind, whatever publication that you write is going to be on your CV, and this is going to be scrutinized when you go for promotion. And the assessors are researchers, and usually researchers in your field. So they will know if there is ham slicing or if there's duplication of results, even in your publications. So be very careful.
Okay, thank you, Prof. There is also another question. I would like to ask how to deal or discuss if some of study finding is not consistent with most of the published studies, which is contradictory.
Yeah. Okay. This one depends on the study. You have to look very closely in terms of your design of your study, the animals that you're using. Maybe they're using different types of animals, and your animal model is slightly different, or your conditions are different. This has to be, looked at individually at how, if your findings are not consistent with others. But if there's something really unique and you are very confident that your findings are strong, and you've taken all the necessary precautions, then you can suggest as something new. But be careful. Be careful when you're doing this. If it is really new, then to claim it as, then you have to be very, very confident to say that, oh, this is new and all the others are wrong. Yeah. So look very carefully. I would discuss this. Discuss whatever findings you have. It's not alone. You need not be looking at it alone. Discuss with your colleagues, with your peers, because when doing research, when publication in sciences, in the sciences, or in life sciences, for instance, in health and medical, it's always benefit. You always benefit from discussion. Yeah, from discussions with peers, with your colleagues, even with people outside. and ask them what they think, even with people not in the field, because you get an outsider's perspective to what your what you are trying to find in terms of your publication, your findings.
Yeah, again, it is more on teamwork, right, Prof?
Yes, a group. You always benefit. That's the idea of collaboration. Yeah, collaboration is not limited to just outside the university or international. Also within the department or within the faculty. There's so much that can be gained by collaboration, because the answers, the questions that can arise, and the answers to the questions can be from different aspects. So the collaboration will be there will be so much benefit from collaboration, even within the faculty.
Okay, Prof, there is another question. I mean, there is actually several questions. How would be best to deal with journals that take a long time even to release the reviewer response? How long would maximum time given before we need to withdraw? 4 months, 6 months?
Yeah, if I were choosing to publish a journal and I want the response to be fairly quick, I won't wait for 4 months. Because if the paper is going to be rejected, it should be rejected straight away. Within 1 week or 2 weeks, then you receive, even sometimes people receive the very next day, I'm sorry, your paper has been rejected. So that's fine. They didn't even send for review. But for review, for waiting for reviewers, because I said you can revise and resubmit, isn't it? Wouldn't go longer than 2 months, Otherwise, you might be waiting forever, because then 6 months is too long. It's half a year. And then you have to wait for another 6 months for another journal. About 2 months, I think, is at the most to get the reviewers. Then you can move on in terms of resubmitting to another journal. Sometimes it's a good sign. If they take a while to send a response, because you know that it is being reviewed, and so there is a chance that it might get accepted. So go by what the journal says in their webpage. It will take how long to revise a journal, and then if it is way past if they say it will take about a month and it's more than a month, then write to them and ask what is happening to my paper, and then do accordingly. Okay.
Okay, another question. Many journals would ask for potential reviewers. Is it not going to involve conflict of interest when the reviewers know the authors?
Sorry, again? Sorry?
It's more when the journal asks potential reviewers, is it like a conflict of interest when we propose the name of the reviewers?
Oh, no. If they're asking, then by all means, send the names of the reviewers, because you then have the advantage of choosing reviewers who you know are kind and will give, and probably in the field, and who will probably give a proper review and very constructive suggestions on how to improve your manuscript. So go ahead and choose the reviewer, but choose accordingly. Choose somebody international and not from just local. Maybe one local and other international reviewers.
Okay, Prof. The next question is about publishing costs, which is actually can be costly. Would you mind elaborate on the available sponsorship from the university or third party to support the publication?
Right. Okay. If it is journals, if the cost can be, you have already costed the cost of publishing in your grant, then you can get the grant to support the cost of publishing. But sometimes it is not sufficient. You can apply for assistance from the faculty if the faculty has, or from the university if the university has. I think go ahead and try to apply, especially if you are publishing in a very high impact journal. The faculty will be, or the university, I think, will try to assist and in terms of the funding. But even if you have to fork out a little bit of your money, I think you should still go ahead. and top up, because it is an investment in terms of your future to get the paper published in a high impact journal. If it is short by say 1,000 or 2,000, so you just have to make do without that very nice handbag and go publish the paper. Yeah? So it's when it comes to, you try to get the funding as much as possible, especially for a high impact journal, but not for predatory journals. Yeah.
Okay, Dr. Roman, we entertain one more question.
Yes, if you don't mind me asking, Prof. Wan, and we can open, I think this last question could be open to Prof. Imad and Prof. Ong Tin juga, just to see homogeneous answer in that sense. Yes, Dr. Amelia, you can continue with the question.
Okay, when writing papers, should we target our research finding and writing to be applicable to be used in Malaysia or on a global scale? Because some practices in Malaysia may only applicable to Malaysia, but the paper we wish to be published may not be based in Malaysia. So what is your opinion on this, Prof?
Should we target our research findings and writing to be applicable to be used in Malaysia or on a global? Both, actually. If you ask me, it should be on a global scale. Sometimes you do not know, you think that it is only applicable in Malaysia, but it's actually could be applicable in other countries as well. It's just that you do not know that it could be applicable. So I would go for, for journals international repute, and not limit to just publishing journals, Malaysian journals, if you are targeting. But also bear in mind that usually the international journals are actually the high impact ones. The journals that we have in Malaysia have not quite reached the high impact factor. So, in terms of reaching the target audience, probably a higher international papers, international journals will be the way to go for publication. Even if you think that the findings is sort of Malaysian, but you do not know in terms of the application or how generalized it can be in terms of your findings.
So the important point is that we target the
high impact journal.
Yeah. So we have to put our focus there first.
Right.
Okay, I pass to Dr. Muhammad Noman. Thank you, Prof.
All right. So with that, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor, both the moderator and the professor, for the enlightening speech. So with that, we kind of like ends our morning session. But just before we leave, would it be okay for all the panelists to open up the webcam so we can take a photo in some sense for orang kata kenang-kenangan in that sense, if that is okay. Yeah? All right. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, smile. 1, 2, 3, smile. Okay. All right. So thank you very much once again to all. On behalf of the committee, we hope that you enjoyed and benefited greatly from the various exceptional presentations that were delivered by our esteemed lineup. We humbly thank again our professors for their time and sharing their experiences. And we humbly thank you to all the participants once again for your time, for joining us to this event. We pray that you fared well in your research and your publication journey up ahead. Okay, Amen. So with that, so I am Dr. Muhammad Luman. I'm signing off again, signing off for this morning's coffee session. Have a pleasant day and have a pleasant weekend ahead. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.
Wassalamualaikum.
Thank you so much. Assalamualaikum.
Thank you, everybody. Good afternoon.
Saya dah habis bising tak?
Habis dah. Macam tak boleh bising tau. Kalau ni, kenapa bising? Dah datang bising dah.
Prof, your mic is still on. Prof. Okay.
Apa ini?
Kau lagi yang lucu loh.